Early in the morning, Ralph drove his wife to the maternity hospital and now paced the clinic's yard, waiting for news. They hadn't slept all night, and when her water broke at dawn, they knew it was time. The roads were clear, so he got his lovely wife there quickly. It was the height of summer, a beautiful July day. And so, his girls came into the world on such a warm and gentle day. The parents knew they were expecting twins, as the doctor had heard 2 heartbeats, but they didn't know the genders. The new father looked at his beautiful daughters and smiled. How would they tell them apart? They were identical. As the girls grew, blossomed, and became young beauties, it remained difficult to distinguish between them. Daphne, their mother, loved dressing them alike. She justified it by saying it prevented jealousy and ensured the girls didn't think their parents favored one over the other. Time flew by, and soon it was their graduation. For the first time, the daughters asked for different dresses. Despite their similar looks, their personalities were distinct. Rebecca, the elder by 10 minutes, had a gentle disposition and was perfectly content at home with her parents. Her younger sister, Allison, was fiery and adventurous. She constantly talked about boys and parties, couldn't sit still at home, and was drawn to clubs and excitement. Energetic and independent, she was unlike anyone else, making her a challenge for their parents. Allison was the first to have romantic relationships and admirers. She was always passionate and fervent, unlike Rebecca, who preferred staying home to help her mother rather than going to a loud nightclub. After high school, they attended different colleges. Allison had a talent for drawing and decided to study fashion design. She could create a stylish outfit from nothing, adding a beautiful scarf or brooch. Rebecca, on the other hand, enrolled in an economics program, majoring in finance and banking, which required patience and diligence. At a party, Allison met a young man and immediately asked if he had a friend. "Only someone serious and decent, because my sister is very selective," Allison warned. That's how Rebecca met Connor, a good guy who had graduated from a construction college and worked as a production manager. "How are you?" he asked politely, looking at the girl. She had a beautiful face and the saddest green-blue eyes he had ever seen. Rebecca and Connor were kindred spirits. Both loved the comfort of home and valued it above all else. Meanwhile, Allison adored her Jude, the editor of Our Town News. The young men were always nervous around the sisters, fearing they might mix them up. The girls, looking at each other, saw their own reflections, the same eyes, lips, nose, hair, and even gestures. Naturally, their parents could easily tell them apart by now. The girls got married on the same day. There was one wedding, with identical dresses, and they shamelessly swapped places, driving their soon-to-be husbands crazy. The guests were thrilled when Jude, looking at his wife, would say, "This one's not mine," while Connor, not realizing the switch, held Allison's hand and refused to let go until he realized the mix-up. The wedding was talked about for a long time, as the girls created quite a stir. The daughters moved to live with their husbands. Rebecca initially lived with Connor's parents, but when their daughter Sienna was born, they moved into their own 3-bedroom apartment. Allison and her husband Jude had a small 1-bedroom apartment. Jude had started building a house even before their wedding, but his busy schedule meant that the construction had stalled. Energetic and driven, Allison took over the project, much to Jude's relief. Under her supervision, the builders made more progress in a month than they had in the entire time before. The sisters' families quickly became close, celebrating all holidays and birthdays together. The house was completed after 2 years. During this time, their son Ollie was born. The house had 5 small rooms, which were sufficient for their family of 3. However, when their daughter Alexa was born 2 years later, the house started to feel a bit cramped. Each child had their own room, and there was a separate playroom where each had their own space. The living room was essential for Allison, given her lively nature and love for hosting parties. If there weren't any holidays on the calendar, she would invent her own: first snow celebration, surprise gift day, first kiss day. Her imagination was so wild that even her party-loving husband once pleaded, I beg you, let's take a break. Turn off the perpetual motion machine for a month. When we have so many celebrations, they lose their charm. Our house is turning into an entertainment center. We hardly see the kids, they spend more time with their grandparents. This led to their first argument. Allison was hurt, believing her husband was wrong and refusing to be the first to apologize. Jude, also tired of the constant festivities, just wanted to relax at home. Despite their disagreement, Allison would still come to bed with him, and by morning, they were cuddled together, their contented faces showing they had made up. Allison didn't want to stay home on maternity leave with Alexa. After graduating college, she had landed a job at a fashion house almost by accident. Surprised and intimidated, she had shown her sketches and was immediately hired. So, even after her daughter was born, she continued working remotely. She was well regarded and well paid, gradually building a network of valuable contacts. Jude's newspaper effectively advertised the fashion house, ensuring a steady stream of orders. The business thrived, and so did Allison. She saw her job as promising and financially stable, allowing her and Jude to occasionally escape together, leaving the kids with their grandmothers. During these getaways, they fully indulged in each other, each time feeling like a second honeymoon. They would spend entire days sleeping, eating, and making love. Allison marveled at how the words honeymoon seemed to possess such magic, drawing them together with such intensity. Jude's gentle touch and tender kisses made her blood boil, and she couldn't imagine anyone else in his place. Jude was tender with her, calling her the sweetest names that made her melt like chocolate. Allison felt they were in another world, one where they only needed each other and no one else existed. They were truly happy. As their time off came to an end, they returned home, throwing themselves into work, always dreaming of the next time they could dive back into their honeymoon phase. Things were much calmer in Rebecca's family, but just as good. Rebecca's family lived in a large apartment building in a 3-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor, overlooking a well-maintained, green courtyard. The couple enjoyed sitting on the balcony with a cup of tea, talking about everything under the sun. They were very close in spirit, and being together was never boring. Connor convinced Rebecca to join his company's economics department. She earned more and they even got to have lunch together at a small restaurant near the office. Their daughter, Sienna, attended kindergarten and was the ringleader among the kids. In December, all the children were invited to a corporate Christmas party. Both parents went with their daughter. At first, Sienna kept to herself, just watching the other kids. Rebecca wanted to help her, but Connor stopped her. Let her be, let her get used to it. Why rush to help when she's not in any danger? Sienna watched her parents and slowly began to warm up. Suddenly, she stood up and started having fun with the other children. When Santa Claus invited the kids to sing songs, he said, "I love listening to songs, especially about snow, skates, and reindeer." As soon as Sienna heard the word reindeer, she loudly announced she knew a song about Rudolph the reindeer and started singing it enthusiastically. Everyone applauded her, and Sienna stood there, waiting for her gift. Santa handed her a small sack, and Sienna was over the moon with happiness. Running to her parents, she proudly showed off the candies she had earned. A man in his 40s approached them and suggested they enroll their daughter in a singing studio. "She has great potential, bring her in, she'll do wonderfully." The parents were surprised by the offer but promised to consider it. However, in early January, Sienna fell ill. Her temperature rose, and Rebecca gave her fever reducers, which seemed to help at first. This went on for 5 days, but she only got worse. When her temperature spiked to 40 degrees Celsius on the 7th day, they called an ambulance. "Why did you wait so long? She has the flu, likely with complications." Sienna was taken to the hospital, and it turned out to be so serious that the doctors fought for her life for 3 days but ultimately lost. For the first time in his life, Connor didn't know what to do. They sat by their daughter's lifeless body, both crying, feeling helpless. Rebecca didn't want to see anyone. She didn't want to eat, drink, or even live. She looked at everyone with crazed eyes, as if searching for her Sienna. She was ready to stay forever beside her daughter's little body or with her pure soul that still seemed to linger in the room. She was their angel, beloved by her parents, but for some reason, she had left them. People usually tell children that when a parent dies, they go to a rainbow and are happy watching them grow. Now, a little girl was heading to that rainbow. Connor lifted Rebecca from the floor, literally tearing her away from their daughter's body, and arranged to come back for Sienna the next day. Entering their apartment, which greeted them with ringing silence, Rebecca began to cry again. Sienna wasn't there to rush and greet them. There was emptiness not just in their hearts but all around. Rebecca's mind refused to accept the reality. Her state bordered on madness. On the day of the child's funeral, wet snow was falling, as if nature itself mourned the brief life of the little girl. Everything felt like a dream. And then, they lowered the small coffin into the ground, and it was over. A little time had passed, but the pain did not lessen. Rebecca's heart was torn apart by grief, and the sorrow consumed her from the inside. Nothing brought her joy, she just cried more from the despair. "Stop crying," Connor said loudly, "you're going to drown our child in your tears." Strangely enough, this had an immediate effect on her. Wiping away her tears, she asked, "How do you know that? Is it true?" "It's true. I'm not asking you to forget our daughter, but you don't need to cry so much. It makes her unhappy." From that day on, Rebecca stopped crying and instead went through photo albums and watched videos of little Sienna. "We're on different planets now, my dear daughter. May you be happy on yours," Rebecca said with tears in her eyes. 6 months passed, but the wound still bled. Rebecca's mother, Daphne, had not been at her granddaughter's funeral because she had been taken away by an ambulance with a heart attack. Her grandfather had barely managed to come. Connor's parents clung to each other to keep from falling but still made it to the cemetery. Allison and Jude stood by Rebecca, supporting her. The words of little Sienna still echoed in her ears. Now that she didn't see her, Rebecca imagined she was just at kindergarten or with her grandmother, and she would surely come home, and everything would be back to normal. It was hard for her at the cemetery, but she didn't realize how unbearable it would be at home, where she would constantly wait for her daughter, who would never return to her parents. One night, Rebecca had a comforting dream. She saw her Sienna in a beautiful blue dress, playing in a vast field of daisies. Then she saw her riding a troika of horses, galloping towards happiness. The wind whistled in the child's ears, but she wasn't scared, she laughed with a clear, ringing laugh. She felt that the horses lifted off the ground, flying through the air. In the night mist, the girl rose higher above the earth. The stars twinkled beautifully, and the moon swayed, welcoming her. It seemed strange to Rebecca that the sky was so bright at night, almost like day. Sienna looked at everything with wide-eyed wonder as the horses carried her further away. "Daughter, be careful, don't fall," Rebecca called out. "Mommy, I'm happy here, don't cry. Soon, you will have another daughter. I don't want anyone but you. Mommy, you will have many children. Sienna, don't leave me, talk to me. Wait, I love you." Someone was gently stroking her hand, carefully at first, then more insistently shaking her shoulder. Opening her eyes, she saw her husband. "Rebecca, you were screaming. Did you have a bad dream? Why did you wake me up?" "I was talking to our daughter. Now I can't see her again. But you were screaming and crying. I was scared for you. I'm sorry. But I saw her so clearly, I was talking to her." She couldn't remember the details, but the feeling of warmth and goodness remained. "I want to go back to sleep, to meet Sienna again." "You'll definitely meet her again, darling. Come, I've made dinner." She agreed with her husband, feeling and deeply appreciating his care. After dinner, she lay down again, recalling the dream. What child had her daughter mentioned? they couldn't have more children. When Sienna was 2, they had planned for a son, but for some reason, they couldn't conceive again. And now, after such stress, it was unthinkable. She didn't want any intimacy with her husband, not that she didn't love him, but she simply couldn't think about it. It was enough that he was just there beside her. Maybe later, but not now. 6 months passed, and Rebecca expressed a desire to adopt a child from an orphanage. "If we can make at least one child happy, it will be a good deed," she explained to her husband. "Dear, I don't want a child from an orphanage. We don't know what kind of child it will be, who their parents were. It's too much responsibility. And it's not easy to love someone else's child. I don't know if I could love this child." "You will, I'm sure. You're a good, kind person." But Connor's parents were also against the idea and didn't want to hear about adopting a child from an orphanage. "Don't you understand? A family without a child is incomplete," Rebecca tried to convince them. "You're betraying Sienna's memory by bringing a stranger's child into our home. Remember, you can never replace Sienna," her mother-in-law shouted. "I'm not betraying anyone. I will never forget Sienna." Seeing that she couldn't be persuaded, her mother-in-law said to her son as she left, "Stop her, son, before she makes another mistake in this state." When the door closed behind his mother, Connor hugged his wife and calmly said, "Let's think it over more seriously. Do you want a girl or a boy?" "Connor, parents don't choose their children. They love them regardless of who they are. So, it doesn't matter to me. I just want to be a real mom, that's all. I don't understand why your parents are so against it. Mom has the right to her opinion. But we will make our own decision. After all, we're not adopting for her, but for us. We have the right to make our own choice, don't we? Let's visit the orphanage, see, and talk to them." She managed to persuade her husband, and the following weekend, they went to the place where children are always waiting for a mom. Arriving at the orphanage, Rebecca sat in the car for a long time, looking at the building's facade. There was no one in the yard, the children were probably having breakfast. She looked at Connor, and he didn't rush her, just held her hand. They stood there for a while longer, and then she decided to go back home. The second time Rebecca went to the orphanage, she went with her sister. "Dear," Allison began, "don't rush. Time heals. Wait another year." Her sister remained silent, lacking the strength to argue or prove her point. What puzzled her was why her loved ones didn't understand her. Why did they think about everything except her state of mind, which would instantly improve if a child appeared in their home? When they arrived at the orphanage, Rebecca got out of the car and walked to the fence. She stood there, watching the children playing. There were boys, but mostly girls. The children seemed unhappy, almost forlorn. After standing there for half an hour, she returned to the car and asked to be taken home. Allison looked at her sister, afraid to ask about her decision. "You're lucky, Allison. You have 2 beautiful children who make your life happy. I haven't been as fortunate. And for some reason, I can't conceive. What did I do to deserve this from the Almighty?" She fell silent and spent the rest of the drive staring out the window. After visiting the orphanage, Rebecca was not herself. Connor tried to understand and give her time to cope with their loss. After work, he hurried home to support his wife. She wasn't working, and having so much free time could play a cruel trick on her. He was very worried and called her several times a day, which irritated Rebecca. "Stop calling me every half hour. I'm not crazy, and I won't do anything to myself. Let me sit alone and have my tea in peace. Don't be upset, dear. I worry about you because I love you." In those moments, she felt ashamed of her rudeness. Her husband didn't deserve such treatment. "I love you too, Connor. I'm sorry. Please come home soon. I miss you." "Okay, I won't be late." He always came home with a bouquet of her favorite daisies and her favorite chocolates. She would light up like a child, and he was often close to tears, feeling so much sympathy for her. If only you knew how ashamed I am of my harshness. I'm sorry that I constantly lash out at you. It's my selfishness. I think only I'm suffering, but you lost our daughter too and are grieving just as much as I am. He hugged her, and then they would go to the balcony to drink tea. She still slept in the child's room. But that evening, Connor asked her to come to the bedroom. I'm not ready, Connor, I can't. Please don't be upset. Just give me time. Don't worry, I understand, and I'm not going to force you into anything. I'm a grown man and can manage my desires. But we need to be together. I'm on your side, and you should always remember that. He kissed her on the forehead, and she believed him. Thank you so much. God gave me a wonderful husband but took away our daughter. For the first time in so long, they lay together, and she felt such peace and comfort with this reliable and strong man. She fell asleep, though she whimpered during the night like a child, perhaps running somewhere in her dreams to see her daughter. One Sunday, when they arrived at the orphanage again, she finally mustered the courage to step onto the grounds. The children were playing, but as she got closer, they turned to look at her with eyes full of hope. Their eyes silently pleaded, "Take me, I'm good." A little girl separated from the group and shouted loudly, "Mom, Mom, I've been waiting for you." Rebecca's knees gave way, and her husband's strong arms caught her, guiding her to a bench. The little girl wouldn't leave her side. A strict voice from a caregiver called out, "Nikki, come here. This isn't your mother." "Sorry, she thinks every woman is her mom." "Who are you here to see?" Her husband replied, "We'd like to speak with the director of the orphanage. She's off today, but her deputy is here. Please, come inside." A kind-eyed woman met them and invited them into her office. "I'm listening," began Ripley. "We'd like to adopt a child," Connor said. "I want to adopt Nikki." "Is that possible?" Rebecca interjected. "Nikki is a bit of a legend here. She's new and hasn't adjusted yet. She misses home. Her father abandoned her. Her mother became an alcoholic, and her elderly grandmother raised her. When the grandmother passed, she came here. She has a difficult personality." "How old is she?" "She's 5. Please think it over carefully. This is a serious matter. Here's a list of required documents. Take your time, and if you decide to proceed, come back with all the necessary paperwork." As they sat in the car, tears rolled down Rebecca's cheeks. Poor child. She's so small and has already been through so much. "Connor, did you like her? She's so beautiful. She even resembles our Sienna a little, doesn't she? Little children all look alike." "So, are we going to adopt her?" Connor asked. "Are you serious?" "Of course. I understand you won't back down, and it's impossible to stop you. So, I'll support you. You have every right to be a happy mom." A month later, all the paperwork was gathered, but Rebecca hesitated. She hung up portraits of her daughter in the nursery, organized her toys, and washed all her dresses. Connor watched in horror. "Rebecca, why did you put up so many pictures of Sienna? This room now belongs to another girl, and she should feel that it's hers. You're making Nikki feel like a guest. That's not right. And what did you want? For me to forget everything and put away all traces of my Sienna? Hang them in our bedroom, leave just one photo here to introduce her." "No, I want it this way," Rebecca responded sharply and refused to discuss it further. On Saturdays, the sisters and their families would gather at their parents' house whenever they had the chance. Their parents cherished these Saturdays, as the whole family would come together around the table, catching up on all the latest news. "So, have you decided to adopt?" Jude asked Connor when they stepped onto the balcony. "I realize there's no point in arguing with Rebecca, and it's time for her to move on. She can't sleep at night, cries in her sleep, and can't focus on work because her thoughts are consumed with the daughter she lost. This might bring her some peace and help her start living again. Do you like the girl? Who are her parents? At the orphanage, they said her father abandoned them, her mother started drinking, and her grandmother raised her. When the grandmother passed away, she was sent to the orphanage. You're doing a great thing. I think your life will change for the better. Thanks, Jude. At the orphanage, they learned that Nikki's father had given her up because he had new children with his new family. Her mother was in prison and had lost her parental rights. It took another month of processing through the necessary channels, and when the adoption papers were finally in hand, they brought Nikki home. The first thing she asked upon entering the nursery was, "Who's that?" She pointed to Sienna's photos. "She used to live here, but now she's in heaven," Rebecca replied. "My grandma said there's no such thing as heaven. People just die, get buried, and that's it." Rebecca wanted to explain that it's the body that gets buried, while the soul of her innocent daughter was in heaven. But Connor seemed to read her mind, and he shook his head, putting a finger to his lips. "Let's go have some tea," Connor cheerfully called out to the child and his wife. "We bought a big cake and some candies. What do you like to eat?" Rebecca asked. "Grandma used to make potatoes with vegetables." "I loved it," the girl said, her affection for her grandmother clear. "I love potatoes too," Connor said. "What should I call you?" the girl asked Rebecca. Rebecca was taken aback and looked at Connor. "Whatever you feel comfortable with. You can call me Rebecca. Can I call you Mom?" "Of course, if you're ready, I'd be so happy," Rebecca said joyfully. "Can I go play in the room?" "Of course, go ahead." Left alone, Rebecca whispered. "What do you think of Nikki? She's a scared child. She'll get used to us gradually, and everything will be fine. You don't regret this decision, do you?" "No, I don't. Seeing your happy face, I know we did the right thing. Love will come, maybe not immediately. You know it's hard to love a child that isn't yours. So we'll work on it." "Thank you, Connor, I'm glad you're on my side." In the evening, Rebecca bathed Nikki and read her stories until she fell asleep quickly. This day would be remembered by Nikki in every detail, as it changed her life drastically and forever. Saturday arrived, and Daphne asked Rebecca to bring Nikki over. "Nikki, today we're going to visit my mom, Daphne. You can call her Grandma. Let's put some pretty ribbons in your braids. Look at this dress, pink with lace. Sienna loved it. Let me help you put it on. I can do it myself." "Okay, I won't interfere." After waiting for 10 minutes, Rebecca decided to check on her. She entered the room to find the dress torn to shreds, lace ripped off, and all the other dresses from the closet scattered around. One white dress had been scribbled on with a marker. Everything lay on the floor while Nikki sat at the table, calmly drawing. "What have you done?" Rebecca shouted. "I wanted you to look beautiful, and you ruined my daughter's favorite dress." At that moment, Connor rushed in and saw Nikki standing with her head down, tears dripping onto the floor. "Rebecca, stop yelling. Sit down and calm yourself." He took Nikki to another room, sat her on the couch, and held her small hand in his. She clung to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Mama doesn't love me. She only loves Sienna. I don't want to wear her things, she's dead. Take me back to the orphanage." "Oh, sweetheart. I understand. Mama is struggling, but she wanted to make you look beautiful. She's trying to love you, Nikki. Give her some time. You'll see, everything will be alright. Do you trust me?" Nikki cried but nodded, showing she trusted him. Rebecca rushed in, holding the torn dress fragments. "What are you going to wear to Grandma's now?" "I'm not going anywhere," Nikki sobbed, "and she's not my grandma." Connor realized he needed to take control of the situation. Change of plans. "We're all going to the mall, buy Nikki some new dresses, let her play in the kids' area, then go to the ice cream cafe, and then we'll play tag," Nikki laughed. "That's what Grandma and I did." Rebecca felt out of place and ran to the children's room, crying uncontrollably. Her tears washed away the pain, the bitterness of loss, and the realization that she could lose this child too if she didn't stop comparing her to Sienna. It was as if she had woken from a dream. Rebecca looked at herself through the eyes of the little girl who found herself in a room that was essentially a shrine to her deceased daughter. She scanned the room, seeing the large photos of Sienna on the walls, her drawings from contests, her dresses hanging neatly, and the pretty little shoes. She had planned to dress Nikki in all of these. It dawned on her that she hadn't adopted Nikki to make her happy, but to numb her own pain. She didn't really want to see Nikki, she wanted to see Sienna. "This is the harsh truth," Rebecca said to herself. "What am I going to do?" At that moment, Connor entered the room. "I'm sorry, Connor. I've failed in my mission. I've been a terrible mother and a selfish person. You know, dear, a wise man once said, the best medicine for a person is love and care." Someone asked him, "What if it doesn't help?" The wise man simply replied, "Increase the dose." You need to heed the words of that wise man, and everything will change. We will never forget Sienna, she was our child, and we will carry that pain in our hearts for the rest of our lives. But understand, that is our pain. And you tried to place that burden on the fragile shoulders of a little girl. Today, I am not on your side. The child taught me a good lesson. If she had listened to me, she would have been the unhappiest girl in the world. Because in my mind, I was calling her Sienna. I realize now that I could lose this child too. Yes, you could. She asked me to take her back to the orphanage. Can you imagine? She thought she'd be better off there. Right now, we can either change everything or fulfill her request. No, let's change everything. But what should I do now? I think you should ask her for forgiveness. Forgiveness? For what? For ruining all the dresses? No, not for that. For trying to see our lost daughter in her by dressing her in Sienna's clothes. This child is alive and needs love, warmth, and care. She has already suffered so much. But I see you haven't understood anything. Rebecca stood up abruptly and left the room. Connor hurried after her, hoping she wouldn't ruin everything completely. She found Nikki in the kitchen, drinking tea. When Nikki saw Rebecca, she ran to Connor and hid behind him. Don't hide behind Daddy. I won't hurt you, Rebecca said softly. The girl cautiously stepped out from behind Connor. Rebecca knelt down to be at eye level with the child, took her hand, and said, I loved my daughter Sienna very much. She passed away so quickly that I didn't have time to comprehend it. But now we have you. We wanted a girl just like you, beautiful, smart, independent, and brave. You weren't afraid to stand up to me and refuse to wear my daughter's dresses. This is a good lesson for me. And if you can forgive me for my mistake, I will try to make things right. Do you think we can do it? The girl looked at Connor, who smiled and nudged her towards Rebecca. I forgive you, Mom. Just don't make me wear someone else's dresses anymore, okay? Deal. Of course, the difficulties didn't end there, but an important lesson was learned, to see a unique person in even the smallest child. Nikki had never been to such a large shopping center before. The colorful lights everywhere made it feel like Christmas. She looked at everything with wide eyes. Her new parents were surprised that she didn't rush to grab everything off the toy shelves. She asked for a soft toy, a ginger cat. My grandma had a cat like this, but after she passed away, it ran away somewhere. She hugged the toy tightly and quietly said, Thank you. Out of all the dresses, she picked only 2, and only after Rebecca insisted. She liked a blue polka dot dress and didn't want any others. A saleswoman showed her a fancy pink dress, but she declined immediately, probably because it reminded her of Sienna's dress. Instead, she chose a simple dress and said maturely, That's enough. The panoramic elevator filled Nikki with indescribable joy. The children's playground with rides, a ball pit, trampolines, a mini pond with a transparent sphere, a live monkey, sand drawing, a kid's bowling alley, a train going through the corridors, and an ice rink, all of this made her head spin. She squealed and rejoiced. After 2 hours, she got tired and asked to go home. She fell asleep without even having lunch, very content, and said thank you. Summer was ending, and Rebecca was supposed to return to work while Nikki was to start kindergarten. It turned out that getting a spot in the kindergarten they wanted wasn't easy. Jude helped, but with the condition that Rebecca would look after his kids while he and Allison took a week-long vacation. Just a week, Rebecca, please, her sister begged. Jude's parents will help. Just stay home for 1 more week, and when we get back, you'll be free. Connor wasn't thrilled about this request because his wife was already expected back at work, and he would have to negotiate with his boss to get her another week off. Sister S kids were wonderful. Their son Ollie was 4, and the younger one, Alexa, was a year old. Jude's mother took Ollie, while Rebecca and Connor stayed with Alexa. Nikki started kindergarten, and on her first day, she came back with a bloody scratch on her cheek and a scraped knee. "Nikki, what happened?" Rebecca asked. Connor answered for her. "Our daughter got into a fight with a boy. She gave him a black eye and pulled out a chunk of his hair. His parents work in the district administration and are threatening to get her expelled. The teacher was yelling that she's never seen such an unruly and mean child." "That's the gist of what I heard when I picked Nikki up," Connor sighed. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Rebecca asked. "Will you believe me?" Nikki asked. "Why do you ask?" "Because Mrs. Pratt said you can't trust orphans. They're all thieves." "I believe you," Rebecca said. "Nigel called me an orphan and a stupid stray. I grabbed his hair, but he pulled away, so I ended up with a clump in my hand. Then I caught up to him and punched him. My grandma told me no one would stand up for me and I had to protect myself. So I did." "Why did he call me that?" "I didn't call him names or hurt him." "Do you believe me?" "Of course, darling, I believe you. Tomorrow, I'll take you to kindergarten myself. Don't worry, now there's someone to stand up for you." When Nikki entered her room, she immediately noticed that instead of Sienna's photographs, there were pictures of her from the shopping center, jumping on the trampoline, waving to mom and dad from the train, and trying on a beautiful dress. The girl gasped in astonishment. How beautiful! But they did keep one photograph of Sienna in their bedroom. Rebecca wasn't quite ready to remove everything yet. She missed her daughter dearly and often wished Sienna would visit her dreams, though since Nikki came into their lives, those dreams had ceased. In the morning, Rebecca accompanied Nikki to daycare. When Mrs. Pratt saw the girl with her mom, she put her hands on her hips, ready to speak, but Nikki's mom spoke first. "Go play, Nikki. I need to have a word with Mrs. Pratt." "Who gave you the right to call my daughter an orphan?" Rebecca said firmly. "And isn't she one?" Mrs. Pratt asked with a sneer. "That's beside the point. You didn't answer my question. Besides, I know you had no right to call her that. You're biased against my child. I will question your professionalism. You've been turning the children against my daughter, and under your guidance, they've been mistreating her. I promise you, there will be a major article about you in the Our Town News next week. Why did you call my daughter a thief? Did she steal something from you? Or did you see her taking something without permission from someone else? No, of course not. You just wanted to insult a child. I'm going to speak to the daycare director about you now." Mrs. Pratt stood speechless, unable to utter a word. After dealing with Mrs. Pratt, Rebecca was visibly shaken. She called her husband and recounted what had happened. "I called our legal department to ask if it's lawful to tell everyone that the girl is adopted. Turns out, it's a breach of adoption confidentiality. They can be held accountable for this. So, if they threaten expulsion, you can use this information. Also, I found out something interesting. This is not the first time complaints have been made against that caregiver. Her aunt, who is the daycare director, has always covered for her. Alright, I'll handle it now, Rebecca replied determinedly. Knocking on the director's door, she heard. Come in. Before her sat a dignified woman with a high hairstyle and brightly painted lips. She looked about 55 years old. Her large chest rested on the table, and rings adorned her short fingers. Hello, Mrs. Ross. I'm Nikki's mom, Rebecca. I wanted to talk to you about the unethical behavior of your employee, Mrs. Pratt, Rebecca began. And what do you want to accuse her of? Asked the director. That she doesn't watch the children. Yesterday, my daughter came home with a scratched cheek and a bruised knee. That's a laughable complaint. I might agree with you, children are indeed very active. But it was Nigel Mixon who did this to her. Have you seen this child, with a bruise under his eye and torn out hair? Your daughter did that, Mrs. Ross retorted. That's exactly why I'm asking, what was Mrs. Pratt doing at that time when the children were hurting each other? She was separating them. After they nearly killed each other. Do you know your daughter was impossible to pull away from that poor child? She's a beast, not a girl. Did it not occur to you to ask the child why she directed her anger at that particular boy? No, I didn't feel the need to. Well, you should have. Let me tell you, the boy called her an orphan and a wretched nobody. I don't think a child would make up such hurtful words on their own. He heard them from Mrs. Pratt, who, instead of supervising, was busy spreading confidential information she got from you, information about adoption. Neither you nor she had any right to disclose this, let alone to children. I have every right to take legal action against you, and I will. There will be a major article in the newspaper about the unfitness of a caregiver who keeps her job solely through nepotism, which is you. She blabbed something she had no right to. I will demand at least an apology if not her dismissal. Yesterday, I filed a report at the police station regarding the injuries Nigel caused her. Rebecca felt she talking about things that hadn't happened. And I identified her as the instigator in the statement. And believe me, I will get my way. She turned sharply and went to the door. Wait, Rebecca. I acknowledge your complaint about the disclosure of adoption confidentiality. She indeed should not have blabbed about it to everyone, Mrs. Ross finally interjected. Why did you feel the need to tell her? She's calling the child a thief. What right does she have? Rebecca demanded. Please, wait, let me call Mrs. Pratt, the director said. 5 minutes later, a frightened Mrs. Pratt walked in. Why did you tell everyone about Nikki? I didn't tell you that so you could insult her, but so you could handle her with special care because she's had a difficult life. And what did you do? Mrs. Ross reprimanded. I only told Loren, Mrs. Pratt replied. And Loren, Cora, edit, and then it spread to the whole daycare. Even the children know now. Rebecca wants to sue us for disclosing adoption confidentiality. What are we going to do? Mrs. Ross asked. How should I know? You're the boss, you figure it out, Mrs. Pratt retorted. Is that so? Fine. Write your resignation letter. I'm tired of covering your back. Your insolence cost me dearly last year. Mrs. Pratt stood there, frightened. She didn't expect such a move from her aunt. Rebecca had never seen such anger in her eyes. But Mrs. Pratt managed to suppress her pride and said, I'm sorry. I didn't do it out of malice. Rebecca left the office and went home. There, she had a serious conversation with Nikki. You didn't need to pull that boy's hair, Rebecca said, raising her voice slightly. Fighting is very wrong. He called me names, Nikki retorted. See, words can hurt just as much. It's the emotional pain that lingers, Rebecca continued, placing her hand over her heart. It's very scary. You have to understand, dear, that after harsh or hurtful words, a person can even contemplate suicide. But there are also words that can inspire, give hope, or express gratitude. Words can be a healing balm for those who are hurting. Nikki sat there, listening attentively to her mother. She thought about how neither her mother nor her grandmother had ever talked to her like this before. She barely remembered her mother, but she often thought of her grandmother. And after warm, kind words are spoken to someone, people change, they feel inspired to do many good things. So sometimes, words can hit harder and hurt more than fists. Should I have called him names too? Nikki asked. Well done, you understood it all correctly. He found your most vulnerable spot and struck there. What should I do now, Mom? You both need to apologize to each other and make peace. You'll feel better right away and will want to go back to daycare. But how do you know I don't want to? I can see it in your eyes. I can read everything from your eyes. I know you're a good girl, and everything will work out for you. And you and Dad won't stop loving me for this? For what? For fighting. She hugged Rebecca around the neck and whispered softly in her ear, and ruining dresses. That's bad too, right? Yes, that wasn't very good. I apologize to you for wanting to dress you in my daughter's dresses. Rebecca purposely reminded her about the apology, hoping Nikki would realize to do the same. But Nikki remained silent. Then she looked her mother in the eyes with a gaze that was remarkably mature for a child and said briefly, I'm sorry. Rebecca hugged her tightly, feeling happy that her daughter understood her. Connor came home from work carrying full bags of groceries. Seeing his wife soothing little Alexa in her arms, he took everything to the kitchen. Their daughter hovered nearby, eager to help her father prepare dinner. Our lawyers advised me to file a report with the police. They should investigate the daycare. I'll write it up tomorrow at work, the guys there will guide me through it. It would also be good for you to meet with the boys' parents. Talk it out and settle the conflict. Alright, I'll sort it out tomorrow then. Rebecca said. Entering the daycare premises, Rebecca looked around for Mrs. Pratt but didn't see her. She scanned the area and spotted familiar children from Nikki's group. Another teacher was with them, whom Rebecca later learned was Mrs. Hill, a woman of about 45, very pleasant with kind eyes. Hello, Rebecca greeted. Are you the new teacher here? Yes, I am now. Mrs. Pratt resigned, and I'm taking over. Come along, Nikki, breakfast is almost ready, Mrs. Hill replied. By the way, has Nigel Mixon been brought in yet? Rebecca inquired. Not yet. Oh, there's his mom pulling up in her car. The boy dashed through the gates and headed straight for the other children. Rebecca approached his mother. Good morning, Mrs. Mixon. I need to talk to you. I'm Nikki's mom. Rebecca. Did my son get into a fight with your daughter? She burst into a hearty laughter, catching the attention of all the children, who watched the lively Mrs. Mixon. Marcia Flynn. Rebecca exclaimed. I've been Marcia Mixon for a long time now. And you, Rebecca, haven't changed a bit, slim and looking fantastic. What? You, the campus beauty, the smartest student, and top of the class. I could never measure up to you. Marcia, let's gather the kids and have them apologize to each other. I've had a serious talk with my daughter. We've talked to our son too. He said he understands everything, Marcia called out to Nigel. Come here. Nikki, come here, Rebecca called to her daughter. The children stood facing each other, heads down. Nikki, known for her strong-willed nature, spoke first. If you stop calling me names, I won't bother you anymore. I'm sorry. I'm sorry too. I started it, Nigel replied. Well, that's wonderful. Let's be friends and help each other, agreed. Marcia said cheerfully, and the children, holding hands, ran off to class. Marcia, I'm so glad it was your son after all, Rebecca said. And I'm glad it was your daughter who gave him that bruise, or else we wouldn't have met," Marcia replied, and the women embraced warmly. Thursday arrived, which meant Allison would soon be home, and Rebecca's life would return to its familiar routine. Closer to lunchtime, Jude's mother called, letting Rebecca know she would bring Ollie over the next day as they were leaving town and wouldn't have anyone to watch him. Ollie was a spoiled child. He could stamp his foot and demand to be given whatever he desired immediately. If that didn't work, he could throw such a tantrum. So Rebecca prepared herself for the arrival of this little monster. "Grandma, where are we going?" the child kept asking the entire way. "To Mom." "Yes, to Mom," Vanessa answered to dismiss the grandchild's questions. By the time Ollie arrived, Alexa had already woken up from her nap and was very excited to see him. Ollie stared at Rebecca for a long time and then turned to his grandmother, asking, "Mom?" "Yes, Mom," she replied. The child indeed couldn't distinguish between sisters, just like adults couldn't. Allison took advantage of this, substituting her sister in her place from time to time. Rebecca adored Allison's children, treating them with great love and tenderness. The children didn't even notice their mother's absence. This time, Ollie looked carefully at Rebecca and believed she was his mother. In the evening, Nikki came home from daycare and told Rebecca about a wonderful boy named Nigel who shared his chocolate with her and protected her from the other boys. Rebecca was pleased that her daughter had found peace in her relationships with the other children. On Saturday, Allison called. "Hi, sis. How are my little rascals? We're all good here. The kids are healthy, fed, and they're sleeping now. When are you coming? You must be tired, darling. I know. It's hard with 3 kids. I owe you. I'll be there, ask for anything you want. We'll make it happen. Okay, we'll expect you tomorrow." The children, of course, didn't feel their mother's absence, but Ollie did ask about his dad. "He'll be back soon, don't worry." He had to go away for work, Rebecca assured him. Sunday morning turned out to be rainy and hectic. Alexa had been crying since early morning, and Ollie was uncontrollable in some way. No one could calm him down or distract him. Rebecca didn't know what to do with him anymore, but when she picked him up, she felt that he had a fever. "Connor, Ollie seems to be sick." "Maybe Alexa is too," she said anxiously. Alexa also had a slight fever. "What kind of day is this?" Rebecca cried. Medication didn't help Ollie, his temperature persisted, so they called an ambulance. After carefully listening to the child and examining him, the doctor said he was perfectly healthy. "Don't worry so much. It happens with children. No need to panic," the doctor reassured before administering a shot and leaving. "Oh God, I hope their parents arrive soon, or I'll go crazy with worry," Rebecca said. Connor took care of Ollie while Rebecca tended to Alexa. Eventually, both children fell asleep in their arms. Evening came. The parents were expected any minute now. Both the children and the adults were waiting eagerly. While Rebecca was occupied with the children, there was no time to dwell on the negative. But as soon as the lights were out and the door to the children's room was closed, she began to worry about what to do. Her heart was pounding so hard, and there was such a lump in her throat that she couldn't breathe. Allison and Jude's phones were going straight to voicemail, which terrified her. "What do we do, Connor?" she asked, looking at her husband with frightened eyes. "Let's wait a bit longer. The weather's bad, it's raining." "Jude drives carefully, you know that's why they're taking so long," Connor replied. "It's already midnight, but they were supposed to arrive by 6 in the evening," Rebecca said, her voice trembling. Connor himself didn't believe what he was saying to reassure Rebecca. In his mind, he understood that both phones couldn't just be silent like this, and internally, he was preparing for the worst. But he couldn't tell his wife that. He had to maintain a calm atmosphere in the house. At 2 a.m., Rebecca's phone rang. Allison's photo appeared on the screen. "Allison, where are you? Is everything okay with you?" Rebecca asked anxiously. "No, not everything," she heard a male unfamiliar voice and looked at her husband with horror. "Officer Samson Phelps is speaking with you. Are you familiar with Allison McLean?" "Yes, she's my sister." "What happened to her? Where is she?" "She and the man driving with her have passed away. They were noticed too late. Their car overturned into a ravine. The road is slippery, and it's pouring rain in that area right now," the officer informed her. After those words, Rebecca simply collapsed to the floor, and Connor couldn't catch her in time. Placing his wife in a chair, he didn't know what else to do to bring her back to consciousness. "Connor, is it true what I heard?" she asked. "What did you hear, dear?" "Allison and Jude are gone. Maybe they could have been saved if they were found sooner. Their car was found overturned in a ditch." "Connor, how do we go on from here? What will happen to our parents? Mom just recovered from a heart attack, she won't survive another blow like this." She cried, and Connor couldn't comfort her. Early in the morning, Ralph called. "Connor, please calm us down. What happened to Allison and Jude?" "Ralph, my dear, no matter how I try to delay, comforting words won't change anything. I'm sorry for the bad news, Allison and Jude are gone." There was dead silence on the other end of the line. Father couldn't say anything, he couldn't move, his legs wouldn't obey. He startled when his wife placed her hand on his shoulder. "Is it the children?" She took the receiver and said, "Allison, you're unbearable." But when she heard Connor's voice, everything became clear. She handed the phone to her husband, clutching her head, she lay down. Connor approached her, sat on the edge of the bed, and took her hand. Looking at her, he saw her face contorted in a grimace, trying to say something, but her tongue felt so swollen that her speech was incomprehensible. Stroke, Ralph thought. The ambulance arrived quickly, and Daphne was admitted to the hospital. "Everything will be fine," reassured the young doctor. "Can I go with her?" "I don't think that's a good idea. You don't look well either. I'll give you a sedative shot, after that, you'll get some rest. Gather your strength, you'll need it." Closing the door behind the doctor, he lay down and immediately fell into a deep sleep. At 5 in the morning, rain began tapping on the window. Rebecca woke to the sound, staring as the rain wept outside. It reminded her of times past. She recalled a memory of her and Allison as first graders, running home from school soaked through. Back then, the sisters rejoiced in the warm rain, but today she cried alongside it. Connor called his workplace and took the day off, explaining the reason. They decided not to wake Nikki, who slept so peacefully, and Ollie snored softly, while little Alexa smiled in her sleep. Rebecca looked at them and wondered, how will they go on? How can she tell the children that their mommy and daddy are gone? She realized she couldn't bring herself to talk to them about it. The children didn't wake up until 8 in the morning. Gloomy, heavy clouds drifted across the sky. While the children were still young, they could stay in this apartment, but eventually, they would have to move to her sister's house, where there was more space. Connor went to identify the bodies to spare Rebecca, she was already fragile. He recognized Allison and Jude immediately, signed the paperwork, and hurried outside for some air. He stopped by a bakery, bought pastries for the kids, and returned home to find the house eerily silent. The children seemed to sense something and tried not to make noise. Ollie and Nikki lay side by side, listening to a bedtime story, while Alexa slept in Rebecca's arms. The woman had lost weight in these 2 days, and Connor even thought she looked older. The burdens piled on her, and it would take more strength and health to raise these children. He felt Nikki understood everything, staring at her parents with concern and fear. "Why are you looking at me like a scared animal?" her father asked. She quietly cried and then asked, "Are you going to send me back to the orphanage?" "It's hard for Mom with 3 kids." Connor quickly reassured his daughter. "Who would give away such dear and beautiful children?" "I won't, and Mom wouldn't want that either." "Really?" She looked straight into Connor's eyes. "Really?" We love you. Thank you, Dad," and she hugged him tightly. Rebecca stood in the kitchen, resting her forehead against the windowpane. She no longer asked herself the unanswerable questions, why, and for what reason. She had no answers to those questions anyway. Now she just needed to get used to the idea that she would live with one wing clipped, the other had been cut off. Daphne was still in the hospital but doing much better. The funerals of the two young and talented individuals turned into a community event. The entire street was filled with cars, everyone offering condolences to Rebecca. The deceased were well known in town. The woman couldn't calm down, tears flowed uncontrollably, impossible to stop. There was an abundance of fresh flowers, wreaths. People approached her, said things, but in her mind, there was only one thought: she was left alone, torn from her dearest person. This thought never left her mind. A year passed. Ollie was enrolled in the same daycare Nikki had attended. Rebecca and her husband adopted their sister's children. Nikki continued attending daycare. Everything was peaceful. Alongside other children, the girl played, learned, read fluently, excelled in math, and solved simple problems. Her parents believed there would be no issues in school. They worried about Ollie. Sometimes he was just uncontrollable. Once, before Christmas, he asked for a laptop, to which Connor replied it was too expensive. Rebecca and her husband endured about 40 minutes of tantrums and hysterical crying Ollie. When the little monster realized no one was in the room and didn't want to listen to his performance, he understood he had lost. Financially, they struggled. For this reason, Rebecca decided to work remotely. By the new year, they hoped that misfortunes would steer clear of them, as their family had suffered too many losses that year. When Nikki started first grade, the family decided to move to Rebecca's sister house. Separate rooms were set up for Nikki and Ollie, while Alexa remained in her parents' bedroom. Nikki studied well, but she had to work hard. She had learned from her mom's lessons that words could hurt and even kill, so she always tried to negotiate. Sometimes it helped, and when it didn't, she could stand up for herself. When their parents came to school, of course, discussions were held, but all the teachers agreed on one thing. A wonderful girl, but she can never deny herself the pleasure of teasing the boys. She needs to be raised as a girl, not a boy, the teacher would say. Okay, we'll try to raise her as a girl, Rebecca would respond, struggling not to burst into laughter. However, if Nikki was reprimanded for standing up for the truth, Ollie was constantly in trouble for his poor behavior and lack of interest in schoolwork. He was always focused on transactional relationships, constantly bartering and selling things at school. Your son, the teacher said disapprovingly, demanded money from a girl for a pen she borrowed during class. It's unacceptable behavior. How are you raising him? Connor felt a burning shame listening to the teacher. At home, he had a serious talk with Ollie. Ollie, what's going on? I'm embarrassed to show my face at school. Dad, don't go there. That old teacher doesn't get it. Everyone buys and sells things these days. How can you sell something you didn't buy yourself? Everything you have is given to you by us, your parents. You haven't created anything of your own to trade. Your job right now is to study and gain knowledge. Once you have that, you can engage in business. Taking money from a girl because she's in a tight spot is wrong. You're a man, and men don't behave like that. I might understand if you made something with your hands and offered it to your friends to buy. You worked, spent time, showed creativity, that makes sense. But charging money for a pen? That's wrong. You always have pocket money. Son, don't disappoint me. You give me very little, it's only enough for a can of cola. Ollie, your mom and I try to dress you well, feed you well, buy you good toys. We can't afford extra, but you have everything you need. What are you dissatisfied with? Can't you give me at least 20 every day? Convince me that you genuinely need it, and maybe we can. Why do I have to prove it? Can't you just give your son some money? You take money too lightly, son. We earn it. Mom puts you to bed and then goes to work. She gets tired, she's a girl. We need to help our girls. Fine, Dad, I don't need your money. The next morning, Rebecca gave him 20. Son, don't waste it, okay? Thanks, Mom. I'll try. A week later, Connor was called to the school principal's office. Your son is playing cards for money behind the school. He's only in 3rd grade. What will happen in 5th, 6th grade? Connor, I'm warning you, this could end badly. Don't give him so much pocket money. You're spoiling him. Connor was in shock. Late in the evening, he and Rebecca were sitting in the kitchen, talking while she cried bitterly. It's my fault. I gave him the 20. I'm a bad mother, but I love my children. Rebecca, love them as much as you want, but why give him so much money? I could have given it to him too, but he couldn't explain why he needed it. Now we know, for gambling at cards. Nikki overheard this conversation. The next morning, as she and Ollie were leaving for school, she grabbed him by the collar and shoved him against the wall. Are you messing with our parents? What's wrong with you, you little brat? Do you know how some kids live? They sometimes don't even have food to eat. And you? You have your own room, Mom feeds you, clothes you, buys you everything, and this is how you treat her. He tried to break free but couldn't. If you dare to upset our parents again, I'll embarrass you in front of the whole school. Want me to start right now? Ollie, frightened, muttered reluctantly. I get it, leave me alone. Fine, I'll believe you, but if Dad gets called to school again, I won't warn you. I'll do what I promised. You can't even imagine what I'll do to you. In reality, she had no plan. She just felt sorry for Mom and Dad and wanted to scare him. Ollie behaved for a month, but then one day after school, he approached Nikki. 6th graders are demanding $50 because I haven't played with them for a month, and they've lost a lot of money. I don't have that much. My parents won't give it to me. I'm not afraid of getting beaten up, but they might take my backpack and ruin my books. What should I do? When do you have to give them the money? Today. My desk mate's dad is a police officer, maybe we can complain to him. That won't help. They're not afraid of anything. It's better to just give them the money. Our parents work hard, and you want to give it to those jerks. No way. Come with me. Are you serious? They'll laugh at you. Let's go. We have no other choice. They're just a bunch of bullies. When they approached the group, the boys stood up and started laughing. Oh, look who's here. Must be bringing a lot of money with a helper. Shut up, said Nikki. Listen to me carefully. I won't repeat myself. Who are you? Asked the leader, known as Chin. I said listen, not ask questions. He doesn't owe you any more money. He doesn't have it, and he won't anytime soon. She spoke loudly, staring directly into Chin's eyes without flinching. Got it? Don't touch him. I know what you're afraid of. Let's go, she said, taking Ollie's hand and walking away. Nikki, your hands are shaking, said Ollie. Not just my hands, my whole insides are shaking. So you're afraid of them too? Of course, but they shouldn't know that. It'll be our secret. Please, don't hang out with them anymore. Let our parents live in peace. They love us and do everything for us. Alright, I'll try, Ollie said. Ollie was grateful to Nikki for what she did. He was proud of her. After that, he avoided getting involved with the older kids and tried not to cross paths with them. He finished the 3rd grade quite well, and his teacher praised him, saying he had changed for the better. Connor was pleased to hear this. Nikki finished the 5th grade with excellent grades. She found school easy and always helped her brother. The next school year, their family had 3 students. Alexa started 1st grade. To give her personal space, they converted the playroom into a lovely girls' room for Alexa. At a family meeting, the parents congratulated Nikki and Ollie for completing the school year and gave each a laptop, while Alexa received a dollhouse. Rebecca planned to return to work on September 1st but was unsure how to manage the children's supervision. Nikki, the eldest daughter, stepped up to help. She took care of her brother and sister, who listened to her, respected her, and loved her. Alexa, a quiet girl, was influenced by her brother. Ollie often got scolded by Nikki for trying to tease their little sister, but Alexa always forgave him. As time passed, the children grew, and the house began to feel small. The roof was leaking, and there were other issues. The house required significant investments. Rebecca, maybe we should sell the apartment and use that money to fix the house. You don't want to rent it out, and we're paying for it but not living there, Connor suggested. No, I don't want to sell it. Nikki might need it someday. She'll get married eventually, Rebecca replied. All right, let's buy a one-bedroom apartment for her and sell the current one, Connor proposed. That's what they did. They sold the three-bedroom apartment, bought a one-bedroom, moved some of the furniture to the house, and furnished the one-bedroom apartment. Then they seriously tackled the house repairs. They redid the roof and built an extension, resulting in a large living room where the entire family could gather. They celebrated the next Christmas in the new room. It was spacious and beautiful. A huge chandelier hung in the center, and underneath it stood a round table. There was also space for a Christmas tree. The parents were happy. Time flew by, and before Rebecca and Connor realized it, their daughter had graduated from high school. It felt like only yesterday they had brought home a scared little girl from the orphanage, and now she stood before them, a beautiful young woman. I'm only applying to medical school, Nikki declared. That's wonderful. We'll have our own family doctor, Rebecca said, hugging her daughter. Nikki was accepted and became a medical college student. She continued to help Ollie and Alexa with their homework. Unlike his older sister, Ollie had no desire to apply to college after graduating high school. He had grown into a handsome, broad-shouldered young man who was popular with girls and enjoyed the attention. Connor, unwilling to tolerate idleness, confronted him. If you don't want to study, then go to work. I don't want to work. I want to take a break. Why are you so tired, son? You didn't exactly work hard in school. I see no reason for a break. Find a job, and in the meantime, you can work as a courier for us. How much will you pay me? I'm not paying you anything. Come and talk. All right, we'll go together tomorrow. Standing before the HR manager and listening to his job responsibilities, Ollie waited impatiently to hear his salary. When he finally heard the amount, he laughed rudely. I wouldn't get out of bed for that kind of money. Then get out, the woman said, shocked that such a respected man like Connor had a son so disrespectful. 15 minutes after Ollie left, Connor was informed of the meeting's outcome, so he came home in a foul mood. Tomorrow you'll go to the office around the corner. They need a janitor. You'll work there. Are you serious, Dad? I won't work as a janitor. Why not? Or do you have an academic degree that makes sweeping leaves beneath you? I don't want to be a janitor. What do you want to be? I'd rather be a courier. That would be better, but they won't hire you now. They can't stand rude people like you. You already heard. News spreads fast there. I told everyone my son would be applying, so they informed me about the meeting. You embarrassed me, Ollie. Enough. I can't stand these grandiose words. Embarrassed, how could you? He mimicked his father. I said I won't work, and that's final. You think I'll let you get away with that? I'm giving you 3 days. There will be no freeloaders in this house, Connor said, slamming the door as he left. Daphne and Ralph were deeply concerned about Ollie's behavior. Rebecca didn't tell them anything, fearing it might raise her mother's blood pressure again due to anxiety. But her parents saw everything themselves. He never came to visit his grandparents. Only the granddaughters came. And if Nicky could evade Grandma's questions, Alexa would tell it like it is. He doesn't listen to Mom and Dad, Grandma. He doesn't want to work, just wants to lie around and play on his laptop. Mom is worried. Grandma understood it all and shook her head. Daphne certainly felt better. But her right hand still didn't work properly, and her leg dragged slightly. Nicky often came by, ran errands, and always took out the trash. Grandpa and Grandma adored her. Meanwhile, their own grandson couldn't find time to visit them. Ollie spent the whole day wandering around the city aimlessly, pondering how to talk to his father about work. He stumbled upon a job ad for waiters but was turned down. Strangely, he felt relieved not to have gotten the job. At least now he could go home and say he looked for work but couldn't find any. In the evening, he waited for his father to approach him and ask about his job search, but Connor didn't ask. He and his mother went out onto the street and headed to the gazebo to talk. Jude's mother called me again today, Connor began, recounting the conversation verbatim. Connor, what are we going to do about Rebecca? When will you tell the kids the truth? I feel like strangers to them, even though they're our grandchildren, and besides them, we have no one else. We appreciate that you allowed us to see the kids, but they still don't know we're their grandparents. Now Ollie's a grown man, Alexa's a high school senior. We want to be part of our grandchildren's lives. It's hard just seeing them, we want to participate. So, I'm giving you another month. If you don't tell them, I will. What do you say? Connor fell silent, waiting for Rebecca to respond. She's right. They are their grandparents, Rebecca said. She choked with tears, but she tried to remain composed so Connor wouldn't see how much it hurt her. She was certain that their lives would never be the same once they told the children the truth. Understand, dear, if Vanessa tells them, they might accuse us of deceit. If we do it ourselves, we can explain that they were too young for this information, you see, he said. I understand. Okay, we have another month. Give me that time to get used to this idea and prepare myself emotionally. Okay. But remember, Rebecca, we can't delay this any longer. The 3 days Connor had given Ollie to find a job were coming to an end, and the young man didn't know what to do. He was still afraid of his father. Ollie's anxious thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. It was Stan, his classmate. Hey, Stan, how's it going? Ollie perked up immediately. Are you looking for a job? Stan asked. Yeah, I am. Do you have something for me? Ollie replied eagerly. My dad needs 2 guys for his company. I thought of you, Stan explained. He's inviting you for an interview tomorrow. Bring your passport and high school diploma. Come to my place, and we'll go together. Stan, you're a lifesaver. Ollie exclaimed. His head spun with happiness as he imagined coming home from work, placing a huge cake on the table with his first paycheck, and his father shaking his hand, saying he was proud of him. Ollie overslept and found no one at home when he rushed to get ready, grabbing coffee on the go before heading to Stan's. Stan's father turned out to be a good man, easy to talk to despite his high position. Decide quickly who's going where and go to HR, he said. We need a courier, a dispatcher for the phones, and someone to put up ads. That's it, I have a meeting to attend. Stan opted to work as a courier, and Ollie took the job of putting up ads. They immediately immersed themselves in work, and Ollie barely made it home that night, his legs aching. Now, every morning, like his parents, he hurried to work. His body adjusted to the new workload. When he received his first paycheck, just as he had imagined, he bought a cake and small gifts for everyone. Rebecca shed tears of joy, calling him the breadwinner, while his father shook his hand and praised him. The time for a serious conversation with the children was approaching, a conversation Rebecca couldn't bring herself to have. They agreed that on Sunday, when they all gathered around the table, the children would learn the truth. But the truth revealed itself much earlier, sparking a scandal from an unexpected source. Alexa had started cleaning her room. With the new school year approaching, she decided to organize her closets and drawers. She wanted to move the family photo albums onto the living room shelf. As she opened drawers, she neatly placed one album aside, but the second one didn't fit. When she tried to put it back, folders and documents spilled out. Sitting on the floor, she began sorting through everything methodically. All the folders were labeled, making it easy to find the right documents. But one folder was unlabeled, catching her interest. What she found inside shocked her. She burst into tears upon seeing the death certificates of her biological parents. In this state, Ollie found her. "What happened, Alexa?" he asked, alarmed. "Our parents are gone," she cried. "Are you out of your mind?" "I saw them this morning," Ollie reassured her. "These aren't our parents, they're our adoptive parents." "Look," she said, showing him the contents of the unlabeled folder she had accidentally come across. Ollie nervously sifted through the documents, finding photos of their parents. He paused, staring at their father's picture, feeling a flicker of recognition. "And Mom looks just like Rebecca. That's probably why I immediately believed she was our mother." "The sisters were twins," Ollie said. At that moment, their parents walked into the house and saw their tearful daughter and frantic son. "What happened, son?" Rebecca asked. "I'm not your son, and you're not my mother. Were you ever planning to tell us the truth? Why didn't you do it sooner? If Alexa hadn't started cleaning out the closets, we would never have known that our parents were Allison and Jude McLean. You're criminals. You betrayed our trust. We were going to tell you the whole truth on Sunday. You were so young, so we decided to wait," Rebecca said quietly. "Not telling you that you were adopted changed nothing. You grew up in a stable environment, surrounded by love and care. If you had known as children, it could have destroyed your childhood. Knowing that your parents died in a car accident is too heavy a burden for a child. It's not for you to decide what we can handle. You had a duty to tell us the truth. I hate you. You'll pay for what you've done," Ollie raged. "We had a duty to raise you, to love and protect you, and to make you happy as best we could," Connor interjected. "We love you like our own children and did everything to make you feel part of this family. Son, please listen." Rebecca started to say. "Don't call me that. My mother is dead, and you're just an aunt. I don't want to live with you anymore. I'm going to Grandma and Grandpa's. They're more family to me than you. At least they didn't lie. Alexa, are you coming with me?" The girl looked at him with frightened eyes, unsure of what to do. Rebecca wanted to approach and hug her, but Connor stopped her. "Let her decide on her own," he said, and his wife slumped, shoulders drooping as she began to cry. It was only now that she realized keeping the truth from them for so long had been a mistake. But she had only wanted their happiness. "I'm exhausted, Connor. Help me to the bedroom," she whispered. She heard the door slam. Ollie had left, but Alexa stayed behind. "I'll talk to our daughter tomorrow," the sorrowful woman thought, covering her face with her hands. When Vanessa opened the door and saw her grandson, she was overjoyed. "Heath, look who's here," she exclaimed, hugging him. "Ollie, dear, come in. We're so glad to see you." "Grandma, I know everything," Ollie said. "Did your parents tell you?" "They didn't tell us anything." Alexa accidentally found the adoption documents, and the secret came out. "Rebecca tried to justify that they planned to talk to us on Sunday, but I don't want to see them. Can I stay with you?" "Of course you can. What about Alexa?" "She was scared, but I think she'll run away from them soon too." "It's not right to speak ill of your parents," Heath said disapprovingly. "They raised you for years and loved you dearly. You had a family, and they made that possible." Connor worked alone for a long time, which wasn't easy. "Well, I came to Grandma and Grandpa's, and now you're lecturing me too. Should I leave you as well?" "Heath, stop it. The boy came seeking support, and you." What about me? He can stay, but speaking badly about his parents is wrong. They're not my parents, and they never will be, Ollie retorted. The next morning, as he rushed off to work, his grandmother handed him $50. Take this for small expenses. You're out all day and hardly have time to eat, she said. Rebecca didn't sleep all night, waiting for her son. She loved Ollie despite all his flaws. A wave of guilt washed over her for not being able to handle all the problems, for letting things spiral out of control, hoping everything would resolve itself. Getting up with a heavy head, she immediately drank a strong coffee and quietly entered Alexa's room. She silently watched her sleeping daughter and couldn't help but notice how much she resembled her mother, and thus herself. Feeling someone's gaze, the girl opened her eyes. Rebecca felt uncomfortable when she saw fear in those familiar gray eyes looking at her. Am I that scary? The woman asked in surprise. It's just that now I know you're stranger to me. Why would you say that? Technically, I'm your aunt. Your mom and I were sisters. Rebecca knelt in front of her. Listen, Alexa, have you been unhappy living with us all these years? We've done everything for you. What has changed now that you know the truth? Nothing. Your dad and I still love you and will continue to do everything for you. Don't do everything for us. Ollie said we should live with our real grandparents and not call you mom and dad. You're a big girl now, going into the 9th grade. Make your own decisions. Do we really deserve this disdain after all these years? I don't know, but he's my older brother, and I love him. If that makes it easier for you to decide, then do what you need to do. I feel like I can't influence your decision, so I'll accept whatever you choose. But for now, get up, it's time for breakfast. Don't act like a caring mom. Have I never made you breakfast? Has my behavior towards you changed? Let me give you some advice, don't say things you'll regret later. Do what you think is right. Alexa nodded, signaling that she didn't care about her ex-mother's problems. Rebecca trembled slightly, then lay down, her eyes grew heavy, and sleep enveloped her. Alexa shut her bedroom door, not wanting to see anyone. She wanted to distance herself from everyone to think about how to move forward. She could go to her grandparents, but they were practically strangers to her too. On Saturday evening, Nikki came home. As soon as she opened the door, she sensed the tension in the air. Mom, is something wrong? This oppressive silence and darkness in the house scared me. Mom, tell me what's going on. Rebecca hugged her daughter, pulling her close and beginning to tell her everything, though she couldn't meet Nikki's eyes. I understand, Mom. Tomorrow I'll go to Vanessa's and talk to them. I never expected such behavior from them after all these years of care. Don't worry, Mom, just rest. Everything will be alright, Nikki reassured her, kissing Rebecca on the cheek before heading to her room. Nikki struggled to fall asleep, thinking about how to approach the conversation so that the kids would understand they were loved and wanted at home. The Sunday promised to be a hot day. She got up early, had just a coffee, and headed to Vanessa's. As she rang the doorbell, she felt her nerves acting up. Vanessa's face betrayed all her thoughts. Nikki? Why are you here? Good morning. Yes, hello. Come in. I came to talk to Ollie and Alexa. I miss them, and I'm leaving again this evening, won't be back for a week. Ollie is still asleep. He's very tired from work. Where does he work? You don't know. He puts up advertisements. I thought he'd moved on to working as a loader, carrying boxes. Sorry if this sounds harsh, but you're making a baby out of a grown man, she said, heading to his room. Nikki, Grandma Vanessa tried to stop her, but Heath firmly told her not to interfere. Ollie was not asleep, he was listening intently to what was happening in the living room. Hello, brother, the older sister said as warmly as she could. Please call Alexa. Let's talk together. But Alexa, hearing the commotion, came in herself and sat down next to her brother. For a moment, the room was silent, and Ollie glanced at his sister sitting beside him. Alexa looked at her brother and then looked away. Now both of them were looking at Nikki. "It seems you both don't understand the nature of the relationships that bind us all," she said, casting a disapproving glance at the kids. "Starting tomorrow, you're both coming back home and acting like adults." "Nikki." Vanessa couldn't hold back and said loudly. "You're in my home, and I'm in charge here." "I'm not trying to be in charge," Nikki replied quietly. "I want to explain to these ungrateful children that I won't allow them to hurt our parents. And I won't be forced to do anything I don't want to. I'm no longer the third grader you could scare." "I've grown up," said Ollie. "In that, you're right. You've grown in height, but your mind is still that of a third grader if you could speak to mom and dad like that. Do you know what an orphanage is, where they could have sent you but didn't? It's a place where everyone picks on you, takes away your treats, toys, and humiliates you. When your parents died, mom and dad immediately decided to keep you in the family. But we want to live with grandma. We like it here more. I understand, grandma is wonderful. She'll comfort you, say kind words, and sympathize if parents are too strict. She'll feed you treats and give you money she saved for medicine." Ollie looked at Grandma in fear, as he had planned to ask her for money again today. "Grandma will always stand up for you, but no one mistreated you in the family. Isn't that right, Alexa? Your parents adore you. If you are Mom's biological niece, you're strangers to Dad, but did you ever feel that?" Alexa stared at the floor, not raising her eyes, while Ollie, clearly misunderstanding Nikki's intent, felt like he had won and thought Nikki was trying to persuade him to return. But Nikki seemed to read his thoughts. "No one is going to persuade you. I just want to remind you that you're adults and should draw the right conclusions. Your parents don't deserve this kind of treatment. They committed no crime. They just protected you too much, and that was their mistake. But can you punish someone for loving too much?" Here, Heath couldn't hold back. "Your sister is speaking the truth. You can live with us but maintain good relations with those who raised you for 15 years, giving you love and warmth from their hearts." "We're not coming back," Ollie said firmly. "And why are you answering for Alexa? Doesn't she have her own opinion? Alexa, what do you decide?" Nikki asked, noticing Ollie nudging Alexa under the table with his foot. Tears welled up in Alexa's eyes as she looked up and said, "I'm with Ollie." Vanessa exhaled so loudly with relief that Nikki turned to look at her. "Are you happy with your grandchildren's decision?" Nikki asked. "Of course, I've waited so many years for them to call me grandma," Vanessa replied. "And the problems that will arise with Ollie, will you handle those on your own, or will you ask Dad for help?" "What problems? He's a wonderful child." "A wonderful child. So, the parents raised him well." "I'm not denying they treated the children well. Then why didn't you send your grandchildren back, explaining to them how to act properly?" Everyone was silent, except Ollie, who dared to put an end to this difficult conversation. "Enough of your preaching. You said we're adults, so we'll do what we think is right. And we think they're not our parents, they took advantage of our trust and deceived us. End of discussion. I don't understand, brother, what are you trying to achieve? Can't we find a way for everyone to be happy? We don't want everyone to be happy. Got it? Because..." He trailed off. "Ollie," Grandpa shouted. "Shut your mouth. Stop bickering and demanding attention. Who are you? A nobody. You barely got by in school, and you work the same way. Do you think Grandma will give you money every day? No. Nikki is right, we live on a pension and save money. So, stop playing the victim. Are you kicking us out, Grandpa? Your own grandchildren?" Ollie's eyes were wide open in shock, scared by his grandfather's bluntness. "I'm not kicking anyone out, but I won't let you badmouth good people. No one forces you to kiss their hands, but you have no right to insult them." Alexa sat crying, and Nikki thought she was ready to get up and go home with her, but Ollie rudely yanked her back down. Nikki realized she had done everything she could, but she had lost this battle. "I have to go. Goodbye," she said, receiving no response as she quickly left the room. As she drove away, Nikki felt very upset. Her mother saw her off in tears. Her father, more composed, hugged her and kissed her on the top of her head. "Come back soon," he said. "Dad, summer break is coming up. I'll be home for a while. We'll celebrate Mom's birthday." Connor and Rebecca also went to work, which helped distract them from their heavy thoughts. But as soon as they stepped through the door, the oppressive silence brought a wave of melancholy. In early July, they received a letter summoning them to court. The date of the session was set for Rebecca's birthday. Nikki's parents told her about Ollie's lawsuit against them. When Heath found out, he was devastated. "I don't want to see him. Don't let him into my room," Heath said. "He's been gone for 3 days now. He called yesterday, barely managing to say not to wait for him, that he wouldn't be coming home," Vanessa said. "See what you've done with your indulgence and money. You can't buy love," Heath scolded her. "Maybe we should ask Connor for help," Alexa asked quietly. Vanessa noticed that her granddaughter didn't call Connor Dad. No, that would be wrong. They're hurt, and asking for their help would seem like mockery. Feeling his newfound freedom, Ollie started to overstep his bounds. He showed no respect for his grandparents, believing that living with them made them exceedingly happy. Alexa had changed a lot too. She became withdrawn and irritable. It was Stan who encouraged Ollie to file the lawsuit, connected him with lawyers from his father's firm. They helped draft the lawsuit and offered to represent him in court without charging him a penny. This made Ollie feel entirely grown up, emboldening him to speak harshly to his grandparents. Meanwhile, Rebecca sat on the balcony, looking up at the starry sky, feeling like the most miserable person in the world. She reminisced about the peaceful times when all the children were home and gathered around her. She remembered with tenderness and love when little Alexa slept in her arms, and the older two lay beside her listening to her read. Back then, their mother was needed. All little children need their mother. But now that the children had grown up, they rejected her and even took her to court as if she wanted to take something from them. She would always pray for them. Rebecca's birthday and the court hearing were approaching. Nikki accompanied her parents to court, as she was called as a witness. The judge opened the session, the clerk reported the attendance, and the court was announced. The plaintiff was called to the stand. It was clear he had prepared, his words written out for him. Standing beside him with her head bowed was Alexa. After reading his statement, he looked directly at his parents and said, "We don't want strangers living in our parents' house. Our mom and dad built it for us, it's a memory left to us from them." "And where do you want your foster parents to live?" the judge inquired. "That's not our concern, right, Alexa?" he prompted, but there was no response. "They have a one-bedroom apartment, they can move there. Rebecca deceived us, exploiting her resemblance to our mom. All right, they didn't tell you the truth. Now that you know everything, don't you feel any compassion for the parents who raised you for so long? Why should we? They're still young enough to start over. They have a daughter, let her help them. They should leave us alone." Since Rebecca was too emotional to speak, Connor took the stand to present their side as the defendants. "Of course, we can move to the one-bedroom apartment. But as Ollie might remember, we had a wonderful 3-bedroom apartment in the city center with a great layout and a balcony. Since the house needed major repairs, we sold our large apartment. We bought a small 1-bedroom for our daughter and used the rest of the money for the renovations. We added an extension so each child could have their own room and the house would be more spacious. My wife and I have worked all our lives to give the children the best, and I don't understand why they are treating us this way. Because you lied to us, right, Alexa?" Ollie elbowed his sister to get her support. Then Nikki was called. Her heartfelt testimony clearly gained the judge's sympathy. She answered many questions, and other witnesses testified about how good and decent the parents were and how well they cared for the children, emphasizing that they did not deserve such treatment. The closing arguments began, and Rebecca knew this was her last chance to present their case. She understood that the final word belonged to the defendant, meaning it would be hers. First, Ollie spoke, and then Rebecca gathered all her strength and took the stand. Her speech was full of emotion, and the judge, also a woman, listened attentively without interruption. Rebecca's final words were directed at her children. "You might have noticed we don't have a lawyer. It's not because we couldn't find one, but because we thought it would be foolish to defend ourselves against the children we love." Ollie tried to shout that they weren't their real parents, but the judge silenced him. Half an hour later, the verdict was announced, and everyone stood to listen. "I have been working for 25 years, the judge began, and I have presided over many cases, but this is a first. Children wanting to evict their parents from the house, forgetting all the good they received. I shouldn't be saying all this, the decision should be based on dry facts and the law. For the first time, I regret that the law has no clause for ingratitude, no provision for how children should repay their debts. For the first time, I am dissatisfied with my decision, but the law is paramount. Therefore, Connor and Rebecca are given 1 year to vacate the house for Ollie and Alexa. This court session is adjourned," the judge said sternly, striking the gavel so hard that the whispering in the room fell silent. "And you, young man," she addressed Ollie, "I hope your children treat you the same way you've treated your foster parents today." But Ollie didn't hear her final words. He was busy shaking hands with his lawyer, thanking him for a job well done. After the court hearing, Rebecca and Connor returned to the house where they had been happy for so long. Rebecca walked into the children's rooms, where not long ago there had been laughter and noise, but now there was silence as they prepared to leave the house. She decided not to contest anything, not to take anything away from them. They had already lost their parents, so let the house remain theirs, the house that her sister and husband had built to keep the family together. Nikki packed her things with Connor's help. They wanted to take everything at once so they wouldn't have to come back here again. As they were closing up the house, they spotted Alexa. She stood before them with her head down. "What's wrong, Alexa?" Nikki asked quietly. Alexa rushed to her with tears in her eyes and whispered, "I love you so much. I'm sorry, but he's my brother. Where will you live now and with whom?" Rebecca inquired. "I'll either live with Grandma or stay here with her now. She's my temporary guardian until I'm of age. Ollie's lawyers advised me to file a statement and choose a guardian myself. So, I chose Grandma. My number's the same, so call if you need our help," Rebecca said. "No, Grandma says we hurt you, and asking for help would seem like mockery." "Why did she say that? Did you want to ask for help from parents?" Nikki asked. "Yeah. Ollie didn't come home, started drinking, so I suggested asking Connor for help." "You don't even want to call him Dad?" Nikki questioned. "Well, he's not my dad," Alexa replied. "Forget it, Nikki." "That's enough," Rebecca interjected. "My heart is breaking over everything that's happened." "Take care of yourself, Alexa," she said, tears streaming down her face. Loading their belongings into the car, they took one last look at their past. They would never return to these places, though they had been very happy here. "Grandma," they left and took all their things. "We really did wrong," Nikki said. "Well, what can we do? That's what your brother wanted, and we couldn't stop it once we found out too late. Grandpa is still feeling poorly. Close up the house and come over, I'm waiting for you," Grandma replied. Meanwhile, Connor and Rebecca arrived at their new apartment. Everything gleamed inside. Their daughter had tidied up and now smiled, inviting her parents inside. "I'll help unpack and then go to Grandma and Grandpa's, and I'll come back tomorrow. And actually, dear parents, I want to suggest something. Sell this apartment and move to Boston with me." "I agree," Rebecca immediately said. Connor stood there, smiling, and his wife understood they had already discussed this with their daughter. "Mama, but that's not all the news," Nikki continued. "Grandma suggests selling their apartment and moving here, and with the money we get, we can buy an apartment in Boston. I want to take you and Dad away from this nightmare. Are you both okay with that?" "My dear, I agree. We need to change something in life. At 40, life is just beginning," Rebecca exclaimed. "Well done. We like your attitude," her husband said with a smile. The rest of the day was spent unpacking suitcases, and thanks to Nikki, her parents managed to distract themselves from their sad thoughts. "God sent you to us," Rebecca said, kissing her daughter. "Thank you for everything." "Mom, what am I doing?" "I just love you," Nikki replied. The next day after work, Rebecca and Connor went to visit their parents to discuss moving to Boston. Daphne and Ralph were happy to see their children. Nikki helped prepare dinner, bought a cake, and a bottle of good wine. It had been so long since the family gathered around the table. "Daughter, let's sell our apartment. Your father and I will be fine in a one-bedroom, and you can start a new life. Nikki will be getting married soon," Daphne said. The parents turning to their daughter as if on cue. "What don't we know? Grandma, why did you reveal my secret?" "I wanted to introduce him to my parents by Christmas, now the surprise is ruined," Nikki said. "Daughter, is he studying with you?" her mom asked. "No, he graduated from the financial university. He's 3 years older than me. He's a good guy." "And does this good guy have a name?" her dad asked. "Well, he does," Nikki blushed. "His name is Dennis." "It's definitely too early to get married," her dad said. "Let's not worry about that now. We have other things to decide," Nikki said. She began explaining their plans while everyone sat, mouth slightly agape, listening to how they would move and live in Boston. "Dennis will help me. He's already found a nice one-bedroom apartment for you. So we need to do everything at once, sell the current place and start looking for a new one in Boston." The apartment was put up for sale. Rebecca felt a gentle breeze of change blowing, giving her strength. The apartment sold, and Dennis called from Boston, saying he'd put a deposit down to secure the one-bedroom apartment before it was gone. The Great Migration began. First, they moved Daphne and Ralph into their new one-bedroom, then they quit their jobs. Nothing was holding them back now. The train carried them away from the city where they were born, educated, and married, and now Boston awaited them. Boston greeted its new residents with bright sun and a pleasant morning breeze. Waiting for them at the station was Dennis. The young man was tall and athletic. His glasses in an expensive frame gave him a scholarly appearance. Connor, at 5'11", was a head shorter than Dennis. The young man gently embraced Nikki, kissed her on the cheek, and introduced himself. "Hello, I'm Dennis." "Dennis, meet my parents, Rebecca and Connor," Nikki said. They loaded all their belongings into the car and set off. Dennis drove them to their new apartment. Rebecca's heart raced with excitement, and she squeezed her husband's hand to calm herself. The car stopped in front of a huge building with 20 floors, and their apartment was on the 10th floor. They had never lived so high up before. They stood before the door, and Nikki, nervous, tried to open the door to the new apartment. They entered and looked around. The kitchen was small, but the living room was large and bright. "Since you don't have a bedroom yet, here's a huge air mattress for you," Dennis said. "Thank you, Dennis," Rebecca replied. "Oh, come on, I'm your future son-in-law, so get used to it," Dennis joked. "Bold. Very bold." Rebecca looked him in the eye and said. Nikki rushed off to college immediately. She was a whole month late and had catching up to do. She lived in the dormitory and had no plans to change anything yet. Rebecca was so tired that she could have fallen asleep right there. But her parents had anxious yet pleasant tasks ahead of them, setting up their new apartment, so relaxing was out of the question for now. Meanwhile, in the house Rebecca and Connor had left several months ago, Ollie had settled in with his buddies and every evening was spent in lively partying. Initially, he lived with his grandparents, but he grew tired of his grandfather's lectures and ran away, claiming he was of legal age and could live independently. After several such parties, he was warned at work that he would be fired if he missed any more workdays. This sobered him up for a while, but not for long, and one fine day he found himself without a job again. Dark times followed, and he had to go back to his grandparents to ask for money. The house was a complete mess, with floors not cleaned since Rebecca and Connor left. "Sis, help your dear brother out, tidy up a bit," Ollie pleaded. Seeing the chaos, Grandma sternly said, "Think about what would happen if your mom and dad found out about this. Who do you value more, your sister and us, or your binges? Why can't you behave like a man, the head of the family as you become after your parents passed away, instead of relying on us and hoping someone will pull you out of the mess you found yourself in?" Before her sat a true spoiled child, completely unapologetic and unwilling to repent. "That's it, Grandma, go away. I want to sleep," Ollie grumbled. Grandma left and he fell asleep. He woke up to the smell of smoke. The extension that Connor had lovingly built was on fire. Momentarily sober, he called the fire department. They extinguished the fire, but couldn't save the large, beautiful room. The house shrunk back to its original small size, as intended by Ollie's parents. A criminal case was initiated regarding the possibility of arson. When questioned by the police about the cause of the fire, Ollie immediately blamed Rebecca and Connor. "They're mad at me for kicking them out of the house, so they set it on fire. Scoundrels. Arrest them and make them pay for the moral damages." "Do you know where they live?" the police asked. "Of course," Ollie said, giving them the address. The police found no one at that address. When they called Ollie in for questioning, they informed him that his foster parents had left town months ago and couldn't have committed arson. "They left? Where did they go?" Ollie asked. "Why does it matter where? They're gone, they're not suspects. You need to repair the house. Autumn is coming, it'll be cold," the police said. "I don't have any money. I thought they would pay for the damage, I would have fixed it, but now I don't know," Ollie replied. "Go and think about it, stop idling around. It's time to get your act together." He found large plywood sheets in the shed and began boarding up the opening. He nailed boards on top and piled garbage on the street side to avoid attracting attention. "I still don't have any money, so it'll have to stay like this," he sighed. His stomach growled. After rummaging through his pockets and finding some money, he went and bought a sandwich. It was the best dinner he had ever eaten, and for the first time, he seriously considered getting a job. The next morning, after eating the remaining sandwich for breakfast, Ollie thought about going to look for work. "I'll definitely go tomorrow. Today, let's chill, there's nothing left anyway," he said, and started calling up other lazy friends like himself, telling them what each owed for parties. Guests arrived already in high spirits. When the music shook the walls of the house, drowning out drunken shouting, and the girls climbed onto the table deciding to strip to the cheers of the young men, it seemed to everyone that the multi-ton block of the house was collapsing on them. Rushing out onto the street, the drunken crowd saw the balcony on the second floor collapse with a creak, right before their eyes. Bricks flew in all directions. Half of the windows shattered. The guests quickly left, and Ollie finally began to regain his senses. "Oh my God, what was that? I don't understand anything," he shouted into the darkness. Early in the morning, he ran to Grandma, trembling, and told her that something unimaginable was happening with the house. Everything was falling apart for no reason. Nothing happens for no reason. We've warned you, but you don't understand and continue to host your parties. The neighbors are fed up with you, Grandma replied sternly. What are you talking about? What warnings? Think instead with Grandpa how to repair your son's house, Ollie retorted. You smell like booze again. Were you drinking with your friends? Oh, Ollie, where are you heading? Now the family nest, as Jude fondly called their home, resembled a half-destroyed building after an airstrike. Passing neighbors mourned the once pleasant occupants, Rebecca and Connor, and deeply regretted their absence. In the evening, Ollie came to his grandparents' house. There was so much joy in his eyes. He had found a job at the market, carrying groceries and hauling sacks. That evening, they gathered around the table and engaged in lengthy conversations, lingering late into the night. Ollie had no idea that his grandfather could be such an interesting conversationalist, with his thoroughly modern perspectives despite his age. However, Ollie's musings seemed troubled. Everyone owed him, especially to his parents whom he had evicted from the house. Yet, he hadn't taken any steps himself to change his life. After dinner, when they got up from the table, Vanessa noticed that Ollie didn't say thank you. He must really be awful if he treats Grandma like that, Alexa thought. He didn't even say thank you. She couldn't understand how anyone could treat people this way, especially when Grandma and Grandpa were so kind, and their adoptive parents had been good people too. Thinking of them made Alexa's heart ache. Where were they? How were they living? Ollie was sure they had gone to Boston to be with their daughter. For 3 months, Ollie worked at the market. He had lost a lot of weight. The work was truly hard, but he had chosen this life for himself. Vanessa was afraid to approach her husband to ask him to forgive Ollie and allow her to give him a little money. Alexa had no problems. She studied well, but she was a recluse. She had no friends other than her grandmother, with whom she also reluctantly shared her secrets. In Boston, things were looking up. With the remaining money, the couple bought a large comfortable sofa, brought their TV with them, and were thrilled with their new apartment. Rebecca wasn't working yet, but Connor had better luck. He landed a job at a construction firm in the production department. The pay was good, and the family slowly settled in. When alone at home, Rebecca would call her mom and ask about everyone, though her heart still ached, and she couldn't help feeling down. But Daphne wasn't about to divulge details to her. Everyone's fine. Alexa calls me, dropped by once. I don't see or hear from Ollie, and I'm not bothered by it. Dennis parked the car not right by the entrance but a little farther away. Nikki was so eager to see her parents that she started yanking at the door handle as they drove. Why are you in such a hurry? Dennis asked, leaning towards her lips. Though Nikki missed her mom, she couldn't resist a kiss from Dennis. Moments alone together didn't come often. She was all about her studies, while Dennis had a serious banking business. It was a kiss that could sweep you off your feet. My goodness, how he kissed. I was supposed to be with my mom half an hour ago, but we just can't tear ourselves away. I'll come get you in about 3 hours, okay? Alright, love you. Nikki usually visited her parents on Saturday evenings, stayed overnight, and on Monday mornings, after her mom's pancakes for breakfast, she rushed off to college. Hi, Mom. Hello, sweetheart, I miss you. Well, Mom, I call you every day, I come over, no need to cry. I want to talk to you about something. Go on, and they sat down on the couch like two friends. Dennis wants to introduce me to his parents. It shows he's serious about me. I really like him. We get along so well. So everything's great between you two, what's troubling you? You see, he doesn't know I grew up in an orphanage. And I'm afraid to tell him. It'll lead to talks about my parents, my mom, an alcoholic, spent time in jail, I don't know my father, you see. And his parents are such high achievers, both doctors, grandparents are medical professors, and here I am, from an orphanage, wanting to marry their son, and she burst into tears. You shouldn't be ashamed of being from an orphanage. Circumstances made your mom a weak person who couldn't handle dad leaving and found solace in a bottle. It's her misfortune. I understand, it's unpleasant to talk about. Imagine you get married, go visit grandmother, and Ollie or someone else sees you, they'll spill everything. What will you do then? Dennis won't forgive you, because you started your life with a lie. But how do I start telling him all this? You can't be responsible for adults' actions. You were just a little girl, what could you change? Nothing. Let me talk to him and explain everything. Do you think that's right? To be honest, no. You have to gather courage yourself. Tell him you love him deeply and believe he should know everything about you. What if he asks why I didn't tell him before? Say you didn't know how serious things would get between you. Understand, if Dennis accepts this news, he'll decide for himself what to tell his parents. Oh, Mom. I feel so awful. He's not buying a purebred dog or the pedigree must be flawless. He's marrying a girl who had a tough life because of adults' mistakes. But this girl didn't break. She graduated high school with honors, got a scholarship to college. I don't know what would have become of me if not for you and Dad. It's all thanks to you. The ringtone abruptly pulled her out of the conversation with her mother. It was Dennis calling. 3 hours had flown by like 3 minutes. Where are you, Dennis? I'm by the entrance. Come down, my parents are waiting. Seeing her daughter's frightened eyes, her mother said. Don't be scared. Tell him you want to talk seriously. Dennis, I won't go to your parents today. I need to talk to you first. You're scaring me. What happened? Yes, something happened. You don't know everything about me. And I don't want to start our life together with secrets. Alright, come down. Let's go, we'll sit in a cafe and talk. Okay, I'm coming. Dennis waited for Nikki, his mood slightly soured by her cryptic, I need to talk to you seriously. What could have happened in 3 hours to cancel plans with his parents? He adored his girl, for her humor, intelligence, beauty, everything about her appealed to him. When Nikki arrived, he didn't even attempt to hide his frustration with the evening. Fidgeting with the hem of her dress, Nikki struggled with the urge to run away, but her deep love for this man and her desire to be with him for life held her back. Taking a deep breath, she began her monologue. Dennis, my dear, her chin quivered. My girl, good, beautiful, what's happened? Calm down. I want to tell you, my parents, Rebecca and Connor, they're adoptive. Seeing Dennis's widened eyes, she continued. Yes, adoptive. The moment I saw them at the orphanage, I shouted, Mom, you found me after all. That's how I ended up in this wonderful family that made me so happy. Their little daughter, Sienna, died from the flu. Rebecca couldn't have more children, so they came to the orphanage. I don't remember my father at all. I have vague memories of my mom, but I remember my grandmother who raised me until I was 3, I think. Then, when she passed away, I was taken to the orphanage. It's hard for me to remember anything good about the orphanage because all the good came from leaving there with my adoptive parents. I was unbelievably happy. I understand about your father, you didn't see him, but he existed. Who was he, and what happened to him? And your mother, where is she, what happened to her? These were the questions she feared the most. Father left us, started another family. And my mom, she turned out to be a weak woman, and Dad leaving made her so miserable that she started drinking, thinking life was over. They took away her parental rights and gave me to my grandmother. That was the happiest time. Rebecca loved me dearly, and Connor is a very decent and kind person, I love him very much. I don't know what my biological parents would have been like, but my adoptive ones are the best and love me very much. Now you know everything about me. You've received too much information, so I won't ask you anything right now. Think about it, and if you want, we can talk tomorrow. Clearly shaken by what he'd heard, Dennis said. I'll call you tomorrow, and bidding goodbye, he left. Dennis's car moved slowly, as he tried to recall every detail of the conversation with Nikki. Approaching home, he knew his parents wouldn't be asleep, and he really didn't want to talk to them right now. His mother and father were having tea, and he walked straight to his room, closing the door, indicating he wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone tonight. Except, of course, his mother, Trinity. Why did the meeting fall through? Everyone was waiting for just you. Nikki wanted to talk before meeting you. Something serious? For her, yes. And for you? For me. I could have found out later, but Nikki is too honest, so she insisted on talking. So what was the talk about, or is it too personal? No, she told me she was raised in an orphanage. He looked at his mother, trying to gauge her reaction, but found none. My poor girl, Dennis continued, she had to endure so many hardships. But it's all right, Mom, she will never regret marrying me. But why did I leave? What an idiot I am. I didn't say words of sympathy to my beloved girl. You can't imagine how much she went through. Her family, whom she trusted so much, betrayed her. She thought I should know all of this. I want to tell you, son, that it's not the worst thing for a child to be raised in an orphanage. And if someone managed to achieve everything in life like your grandfather, the professor known throughout Boston, it speaks of the core, the character that keeps moving forward. Wait, Mom, what does Grandpa have to do with this? Oh, son, your grandfather, he too was from an orphanage. Are you serious? Absolutely. Your grandfather Douglas doesn't like to talk about it now. He was born in 1940, during the war. His father went to the front and unfortunately never returned. His mother was left with 2 children. Little Douglas was left with your great-grandmother's neighbor while she went to the store and never came back, probably caught in crossfire. The neighbor had 3 of her own children, so they took him to an orphanage, and that's the story. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? Well, now I'm telling you. So you're Nikki, she's also from an orphanage and she's also a doctor, she's ours. Now, what have you decided about Nikki? Tomorrow I'll go, apologize for leaving so abruptly after hearing all that, and then we'll arrange a meeting with you. All right. I really want to meet her, Trinity said. That night, Dennis thought long about how best to apologize to Nikki the next day. And she, too, didn't sleep in thought. Oddly enough, she wasn't at all angry with him. This night she realized she truly loved Dennis, that her life was only connected with him. Nikki overslept for college. Mom, what should I do? By the time I get there, the important classes will already be over. Rest today, you never skip classes. She was about to lie down again, but the phone rang. Nikki, good morning. I suggest skipping college today and I'll skip work. I'll come pick you up now and we'll talk. After these words, her mood dropped a bit, but after a few sips of coffee, she went to meet Dennis. Before leaving the entrance, she took a deep breath, put on a smile, and opened the door. A young man stepped out of the car with a huge bouquet and a small velvet box. My girl, I love you so much and I want us to be together always. I'm sorry for yesterday, my mind was in turmoil, I needed to think it all through. This ring, if you don't mind, will be a token that our wedding will indeed happen. They hadn't even gotten into the car yet when they embraced each other as if they hadn't seen each other for a month. Then they went out for lunch and spent the entire day together. It was already dark when they arrived home. Rebecca was waiting for her daughter's return. She didn't know Dennis well enough yet to trust him completely. She watched from the window as the young couple got out of the car, hugging and kissing. Ah, youth, she thought. Hugging his wife from behind and pulling her close, Connor, guessing her thoughts, said. Remembering our youth? Yes, those were good times. So much has changed since then. But one thing remains the same, I love you just as much, he said, inhaling the scent of her hair, and it will always be that way. Hearing the sound of the key in the door, the parents quickly went to bed. They didn't want to show her that they were waiting and didn't trust her. They fell asleep immediately, peacefully, knowing their daughter was home. Seeing Nikki off to college in the morning, Rebecca knew she wouldn't see her again for a week. But Dennis came to the college every day to meet Nikki with a bouquet. Nikki, the second meeting with my parents is set for Saturday. Can you make it? Of course. I feel much calmer and more confident now. I'm ready to meet my future in-laws. I like your attitude. On Saturday, at exactly 6 in the evening, the young couple entered the apartment. Nikki was a little nervous, though. They were greeted by Dennis's mom. Finally, come on in, she said with a smile. She was the petite mistress of a large house. With a quick glance, Nikki noted the size of the apartment and its decor, which, compared to her parents' place, was like a royal palace. Good evening, she said quietly. A tall, gray-haired man rose from the table. She knew this was Professor Douglas Least. Hello, colleague. It turns out we share the same blood. Nikki's eyes widened in surprise as she looked at Dennis. Why are you looking at him? He doesn't understand our orphanage struggles, where everything was hard-earned. What? You too? She asked, bursting into tears. No one had expected this. The man hugged her but didn't try to console her. His large hands were warm, and Nikki felt completely safe. That evening, there was a relaxed atmosphere at the table. Everyone praised Trinity's culinary skills. By the end of the evening, there was even dancing. Dennis didn't drink a drop of alcohol all evening so he could drive Nikki back to the dormitory himself. They arrived at the dormitory precisely at 11. Good night, said Dennis, and drove back. He couldn't wait to ask his parents if they liked Nikki. Of course, he wanted everyone to love his girl. His parents were having tea and chatting quietly. Mom, what do you think of my Nikki? She's a good girl. Intelligent, well-read, and she spoke so warmly about her adoptive parents. It's rare to hear such things even from biological children. We should invite her parents over to get to know them better, Trinity replied. And you, Dad, why are you silent? There's nothing more to add. Your mother said it all, and your grandfather wanted me to tell you that he approves of your choice. I'm so glad everyone likes my Nikki. I adore her. She caught my attention right away when she refused to get into my car. Her friends all jumped in, but she didn't. Later she told me her mom had forbidden her to get into cars with strangers. Christmas was approaching. The winter was cold, but there wasn't much snow. Nikki decided to take her exams early so she could visit her grandparents for Christmas and return on the 25th. Dennis's parents had invited Rebecca and Connor to their place for Christmas. Dennis was planning to take her there. Nikki packed a small suitcase, took gifts for her grandparents, some groceries, and medicines, and they set off. Nikki arrived in the town where she spent her childhood, where every street held warm memories. This was where her new life with her mom and dad began. Here, she felt at home. Nikki decided to show Dennis the house where she had spent the happy years of her childhood. As soon as they approached, Nikki gasped. Where's the balcony? She asked out loud. What balcony? Asked Dennis. There used to be a balcony on the second floor. Mom and Dad loved to drink tea there in the evenings. But now it's gone. Ollie and Alexa came out of the house. And here are some relatives. Nikki didn't really want to see Ollie, but she was happy to see Alexa. Look who it is. Ollie said in his usual arrogant tone. And hello to you too. Alexa rushed to hug Nikki. You've become such a beauty. How's your studies? Nikki said. Everything's going well. You look different too. So stylish. Dennis, this is Alexa, and Ollie is her brother. Nikki said. I see you're doing well, Ollie said, circling around Nikki and looking her over. Your clothes aren't cheap. Earning a lot. Care to share? Still counting other people's money and refusing to work yourself, I see. Nikki said. Ollie, enough. I'm tired of your arguments, said Alexa. Shut up, kid, nobody asked you, Ollie snapped. You're still the same jerk, Nikki said. Don't you want to give some money to repair your old house? This house stopped being mine the day you kicked out our parents. But you lived in it, and debts need to be paid. When our parents lived here, Dad kept the house in perfect order. They even sold their apartment to expand and renovate it. Now it's your house, and you'll have to maintain it. Well, then I'll have to tell your friend here the truth about our Nikki. And what do you think you can say that I don't already know? Dennis joined the conversation. Oh, it's worth money. Come inside, and I'll tell you everything. Do you think I'm interested? I think you are. It's reliable information from the source. Sell it to someone else. Let's go, Nikki. Ollie realized he wouldn't get any money, but he couldn't resist taking a jab at Nikki. She's an orphan, her mother was a drunk, and her father abandoned her. That's who you're embracing. What does Nikki have to do with that? Her mother chose that life, and so did her father. Besides, this information is outdated. I know everything about my future wife. So spit out your venom, or you'll poison yourself, Dennis replied, walking away with Nikki, leaving Ollie stunned. You're such a hateful person, brother. What did Nikki ever do to you? She always had your back. You're ungrateful. Alexa exclaimed, hurrying away from her older brother. Hey, where are you going? I see you've become independent. Wait up. Go to hell, Alexa shot back, rushing to catch up with the departing couple. She wanted to talk to her sister, whom she loved very much. Alexa caught up with her sister, and they walked together to their grandmother's house. When Nikki opened the door, her grandmother looked at Dennis with curiosity, then turned to Nikki, expecting an explanation. Grandma, this is Dennis, my boyfriend. Dennis, this is my grandmother, Daphne. And you already know this girl, don't you? Yes, we know each other well. She visits me often, and we're friends. After introducing Dennis to her grandfather, Ralph, they all sat down for tea and shared news. Alexa, when do you finish school? Nikki asked. This year and next, then goodbye school. What are your plans after that? I want to be a fashion designer, like Mom. I found her sketches and drawings. She had brilliant ideas, and I want to continue what she couldn't finish. That's commendable. And how are Jude's parents? Grandpa passed away recently after one of Ollie's terrible fights. The ambulance didn't make it in time. Since then, Grandma has been different, kind of detached. She does everything automatically, but her eyes are lifeless. I feel so sorry for her. Now there's no one to put Ollie in his place, and he's become the head of the family. When Alexa returned home, she heard shouting from the apartment even before reaching the door. Grandma and Ollie were fighting. He was demanding money, and she was screaming that she couldn't remember where she put it. He had ransacked the wardrobe, leaving clothes strewn all over the floor while Grandma took her sedatives. Alexa approached her brother. If you don't stop this instant, I'm calling the police. I'm not joking, she said, starting to dial on her phone. Snatching the phone from her hands and putting it in his pocket, he finally calmed down and went to his room. Alexa, tomorrow I'll give you the apartment documents. Grandpa and I transferred it to you. Take them to that grandmother. It'll be safer there. Do as I ask, dear, said Grandma. Okay, Grandma, I'll drop by after school tomorrow and leave the documents with them. That night, Vanessa had to be taken to the hospital by ambulance. It's for the best, Alexa thought. She'll be more at peace there. 2 weeks later, Vanessa was discharged. In the evening, mustering all her courage, she asked Ollie to move out. I can't live with you anymore, Grandma said firmly. You're an adult, you work, and you can live on your own. You can take some groceries from me, but I won't feed you or give you money anymore. That's my final word. His first impulse was to start another fight, but he was so exhausted from work that he didn't have the energy to argue. Fine, I won't come here after work tomorrow, he said, slamming the door hard as he left. Alexa couldn't sleep. She took out her mother's sketches, studying them and trying to create something on her own. While she was getting better, she still lacked experience and knowledge, but she had the most important thing, desire. Alexa placed the drawings in front of her, curled up in a chair, and stared at them. She was amazed at how her mother captured the essence of each design, with every detail perfectly noted and not a single unnecessary stroke. Alexa was determined to continue her mother's work. When she finally looked up at dawn, she realized she had fallen asleep fully dressed, with the drawing still in front of her. Rebecca and Connor decided to spend Christmas at home. They convinced their daughter that it would be awkward to celebrate such a family-oriented holiday with strangers. "Daughter, we're not related to them, and you and Dennis are just starting your relationship. What role would we play there?" "No, my dear, the best I can do is let you go," Rebecca said. "No, Mom, I'll stay with you too. Dennis can decide for himself what to do. After all, he's a grown man," Nikki replied. And so it was decided. Even in their small apartment, they managed to fit a Christmas tree, which immediately created a festive atmosphere. Dennis was disappointed by Nikki's parents' decision. With no other choice, Dennis spent Christmas with his own family and then planned to visit Nikki afterward. Ollie truly didn't return to his grandmother's house, not even for Christmas. Alexa and her grandmother spent the holiday together, had dinner, watched TV, and for the first time in months, went to bed peacefully. In the spring, Vanessa passed away. Alexa was close to turning 18, and Daphne and Ralph became her guardians. They supported each other. The family decided that once Alexa turned 18, they would sell the apartment and move to Boston, where Nikki, Rebecca, and Connor could help them. While Alexa was taking her exams, Daphne and Ralph were already meeting potential buyers. A young couple, eager to start their family life, bought the apartment. That's when Ollie showed up. Seeing strangers in the apartment, he was stunned. "We bought this apartment, it's ours now," they told him. Angry about losing the apartment, Ollie went to confront Daphne and Ralph. The encounter was cold. "Why did you do this to me, sis? Where am I supposed to live? The house needs repairs, it's freezing in winter. You sold the apartment and are running away. Leave me some money from the sale for the house repairs." Ralph stepped in to defend his granddaughter. "I hear the words of a sniveling boy, not a man. Get a job, repair the house. There's no money left, we've already bought an apartment in Boston. Alexa will live and study there. I hate all of you," Ollie said and left. Of course, Ralph had lied a bit, the new apartment hadn't been bought yet. Ollie, not wanting to return to his previous job, made a rare smart decision and joined the army. Without telling anyone, he resolved everything in one day and left. He went to a remote duty station where he could advance his career. 5 years later, he married a young nurse, and 5 years after that, he retired and moved with her to a small town. Alexa's new apartment was in the same neighborhood as Rebecca and Connor's. Nikki and Dennis met her at the station and took her to the new apartment. The first thing she needed to do was visit Rebecca and Connor, but she couldn't bring herself to do it immediately. She decided to finish her exams and go to her adoptive parents with the good news. But she didn't want to delay making amends any longer. She bought a cake and went to their house. Standing outside their door felt uncomfortable, but she bravely waited for her fate. The door opened suddenly, and there stood Connor and Rebecca, smiling. "Alexa, come in. Why are you just standing there?" "Hello," she said, unsure how to address these kind and smiling people she had wronged by supporting Ollie in kicking them out of their home. "Please forgive me. I think my parents would have been disappointed by my actions. I can't put all the blame on Ollie, I could have chosen not to support him, but I didn't." Her first instinct was to run to them and hug them, but she was scared. She didn't know how they would react. "What are you afraid of, dear?" Rebecca asked softly. Alexa forced herself to apologize again and hug Rebecca. When their eyes met, Alexa saw so much sadness and regret in Rebecca's eyes about what had happened that she hugged her again. Blood rushed to her cheeks, her temples throbbed, but she was proud of herself for doing it. Sitting at the table, they drank tea with cake and talked about Alexa's plans for college and how she wanted to continue her mother's work. You'll do great, girl, Connor said confidently. We're always here for you, and stop blaming yourself. It's all in the past, though it's a shame about the house. Maybe you could stay with us. Your apartment is quite empty, Rebecca suggested. No, I need to get used to living on my own, Alexa replied firmly. It was late when her parents walked her home. That night, Alexa slept peacefully and dreamed a wonderful dream. The house was renovated, better and bigger than before. It was filled with people, and in a corner, her parents watched the festivities. They smiled, looking at everyone with interest, and as soon as their daughter approached, they disappeared, leaving behind a white cloud. She woke up and lay in bed for a long time, catching her breath. She had only seen her parents in photos, but here they were alive and so beautiful. Alexa's life truly changed. She felt she wasn't alone, that she had someone to turn to for help. She felt strong, eager to live and create, and all it took was asking for forgiveness from good people. This was more for her own sake, to not feel ungrateful. Admitting one's mistakes and asking for forgiveness is part of being an adult. Yesterday, she had done everything within her power. Alexa managed to get into college, and she was lucky with work. Like her mother, she went to the fashion house, showed her drawings, opened large portfolios with her works, and some caught their interest, so they hired her. Thus began Alexa's new adult life. She often visited her adoptive parents, sought advice, and even stayed overnight. One day, when the children visited Rebecca and Connor suddenly suggested renovating the house so everyone could gather there and remember Jude and Allison. He wanted to turn it into a true family estate. Nikki immediately supported her father and suggested everyone chip in money and start construction in the summer. I'll contribute too, Alexa said right away. Count me in, Dennis offered. I can be useful too. By summer, they had raised a decent amount, and Connor and Dennis went to the site. What they found was even worse than they had imagined. Connor's heart ached at the sight of such a nightmare. How fortunate that Jude and Allison aren't here to see this, he thought. Assessing the work needed and the materials to be purchased, Dennis found a good team of workers, and the grand construction began. The work continued until late autumn. When the rain started, they began the interior finishing. Everyone was in a rush because they all had one crazy desire, to celebrate Christmas in the renovated house. On December 25th, they decorated a huge Christmas tree, placing it exactly where Jude had set up the first one years ago. They set a large round table, bought especially for the housewarming. Dennis announced that he had a surprise for everyone. And indeed, when they all went outside with champagne to see the big surprise, his parents' car pulled up to the house. Everyone had come. At that moment, a spectacular fireworks display began. It was so beautiful that neighbors gathered to watch. Meanwhile, in a distant city, another member of this close-knit family couldn't sleep. Ollie lay with his eyes open, listening to his wife's peaceful breathing. Their life was relatively good, they didn't have children yet, but Ollie wasn't worried about that. His wife was kind to him and tolerated his difficult personality. Sometimes, when she annoyed him too much, he felt like running away back home. But he knew he wouldn't find another woman who would put up with him. Besides, he had nowhere to live. The house was ruined, there was no money to fix it, and Alexa had completely slipped out of his control, even selling the apartment without telling him. So, his fate was sealed here. He hugged his wife tightly and fell asleep. Everyone had a wonderful time, but Dennis's parents were getting ready to leave. "We are very happy to have met you," said Trinity. The house became quiet and a bit sad as the day approached when they would have to close this wonderful, welcoming home and leave it for a while. But they knew they would return again and again to sit together at the table, under the smiling gaze of the young and beautiful Jude and Allison. Epilogue. Ollie never returned and never learned that the house had been restored and brought back to life. He lost the most important thing, his family. This house was more than just their ancestral home, it would see many generations grow up. It would witness many more celebrations, with children running around, making it lively and happy. Nikki would marry Dennis, and they would have 3 children, a boy who would continue Dennis's work, and 2 girls who would follow in their mother's footsteps and become doctors. Alexa would marry late, having almost given up on finding happiness. But at one fashion show, she would meet the one. They would have a daughter who would become a famous photographer. Rebecca and Connor would live long, happy lives and pass away almost on the same day. Connor would go first, followed by Rebecca a month later. She could have lived longer, but grief took its toll. When they were gone, Nikki would feel orphaned for the second time, losing not just parents but the friends who had changed her life the day they appeared in the orphanage. She would always tell her children many warm stories about them. This proves once again that parents are the ones who raise you, giving a piece of their soul and heart, offering love, warmth, and hope for